All right, what's up? Welcome, everybody. Another open forum, another situation of debate, another situation, the war room, crisis, problem, reaction, solution. Cheetah Ori. Open forum debate. The topics are, remember to keep it to the topics today, guys. You don't have to debate. If you want to, you can. The topics are, as listed last time, same topics: Bible, church history, patristics, councils, Islam, Koran, Revelation, Protestantism, Calvinism, evangelicalism, Roman Catholicism, papacy, Arianism, cults, Hebrew roots, Jehovah's Witnesses, etc., etc. Black Hebrew Israelites, Yaqub. All of these topics are open for discussion today. I see we have people who would like to discuss Porphyry, Neoplatonism. All of those topics are also welcome. The call-in is via Twitter Spaces. You'll see the link in the show description. It is the Twitter space. So if you want to call in and ask, you don't have to debate. You can ask a question. But if you want to debate, raise your hand and you'll go to the front of the line. Remember, today isn't FAQ questions for Orthodox catechumens. So if you're a catechumen and you have those kinds of questions, you can take those to your spiritual father. You can take those to competent people online who can answer those questions. Really, today we're looking for people who disagree, people who have an argument they want to present, a case that they'd like to make. Remember, the way argumentation works, it's not arguing. Arguments, in the strict sense, are some thesis with supporting evidences, syllogisms, etc., to back up what the case is. If you come on and say a bunch of stuff and talk about me, or if you want to talk about drama, none of that is relevant. None of that is an argument. We can go ahead and just assert and agree from the outset, I'm the worst person ever. I am the worst KGB drug lord, also working for the CIA. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's get to the actual argumentation. So we're going to focus on that. If you're a drunk wine mom and you call in, we're going to make fun of you. If you're a person who wants to come in and spit their bars, you're going to get made fun of too. If I interrupt you, it's because you're not sticking to the topic or to the issue, and that's fair game. Now, again, you don't have to debate, but if you do want to debate, you can. So let's make that clear for everybody. Remember, the topics are listed. You can only put a certain number of characters in the topic description on the Twitter space, so I can't fit everything in there that I'd like to. Even though it says God, Islam, Catholicism, Protestantism, I put Sneeko and Tate in there because that's in the news. We just had the impromptu debate with Muslim Lantern, 2 nights ago? So I figured that might be hot topics. If the people from that sphere want to hop on and debate. I don't mean that I don't expect Muslim Lantern or Sneeko to hop on. I'm saying the people from that sphere, if they want to hop on. But now last time, we ended up having way more Roman Catholics in this last 6-hour live stream calling in than I expected. So you never know what you're going to get. You think you're going to get more Islamic debates and discussions, and it ends up being Protestants or Calvinists or Catholics or whatever. So it's open for them. We never know. It's a roulette wheel of feral madness, and I embrace it. We have fun with it. So don't get your feelings hurt if you come to debate and I start debating and then you play victim. I didn't come to debate. Well, it says debate, and you can specify from the outset whether you want to debate or not. Again, the topics are listed, and the show link, the call-in, is in the description of the show, and of course the mods on YouTube will continually be putting it in there as well. Also, to be clear, because there are a lot of Muslims that are coming over this way, I am not an expert in Islam, and I've never pretended to be. It is a topic that I devote time to studying on the side, so it is not my main focus of whatever. It's not my main attention. It's not the sort. What am I trying to say? I can't talk today. It is not the locus of my attention. We have had several debates, though, in the last 6 years, and so it is on my radar. I've read several books on Islam. I've read a good portion of the Koran. I've not read the whole thing. I'm familiar with the basic ideas of the various schools, creeds. I know there's a difference between a creed and a fiqh, or jurisprudence. I'm aware of those things. So let's not haggle over minutia if you want to debate. Let's get to the main issues. Yeah, if you want to do Trinity Tawhid, that's also fair game as well. We can talk about that. We can talk about anything related to Trinity, Christology. Those are the areas I know very well. Anything related to Torah, prophets, etc. Those are the things that are my focus. Church Fathers, I know that very well. Now, Dr. Khalil is here. He and I, people are saying, when are you going to have a debate with Khalil? We have had multiple discussions on doing a stream where we perhaps first have open discussion and then later a debate in a timed, formal way. Or we might just have discussions. I'm definitely open to that. Of course, he is Shia, so he comes from a different perspective than most of who we debated so far. I think everybody we've debated so far is Sunni. I can't think of any. I think one time a Sufi guy called in. No, two Sufis have called in to debate on the open forums we do here. But for the most part, I think we've only debated from within the Sunni tradition. And that includes both Salafi and non-Salafi. So, let's see, Paul Williams, Azhar Rashid, Shabir Ali, right? We had debates with them, and then we had debates with Daniel, Jake, Ijaz, and Daniel again, and then Muslim Lantern. So, I don't know, about 7 debates now. Anyway, you're free to set the topic. If you want to set the agenda, what topic you want to talk about, just let me know from the outset. If you want to make an argument for, say, I want to make an argument for 3 minutes straight, let me talk for there. Oh, yeah, you can do that. Fine. Just make it clear what you want to do. Again, keep it to the topics. If you don't, I'm immediately just going to boot you and move on. So we'll go ahead and open it up. Let's see. First up was Black Sufi Malik. And we were discussing in replies on Twitter. So what's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, Jay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so first and foremost, I did see that thing that you posted about how would a 7th century Christian or Jew know that Islam is true. On the traditional Islamic narrative, it's quite clear that during the time of the Sahaba or the companions themselves, there were true prophecies of the Prophet coming true. For example, in the Quran, on the traditional narrative, the Quran openly predicts, or the Prophet only openly predicts, that Rome would beat the Persians. The Romans would beat the Persians in their war, that certain people would die or pass away, on top of the miraculous elements of Islam.
Well, but that's not what the dilemma challenge is, though. It's not related to that.
I am making the point, though, that they would have evidences to justify their belief in Islam.
But how does that answer the challenge about the Quran saying, confirm the Quran with prior revelation?
I would say the Quran doesn't confirm prior revelation. So I would just totally reject that premise. So
these verses are not saying that you can look to the Torah and the prophets and all of that?
You don't need to look to the Torah and prophets.
No, but I'm saying, do the verses say that?
Sure, right? In the uncorrupted versions and things like this, we would say that you can, right? And there's possibly stuff within the New Testament.
Okay, so how do you know where is the uncorrupted version?
I don't think there's whole uncorrupted versions, but we would say there are snippets.
Where is that the 7th century Christian or Jew could look to?
So, for example, there are tons of verses that somebody would say that you can contextually argue would talk about would talk about the Muhammadan prophecy within the Torah or within the New Testament, right? That many Muslims, I'm pretty sure you've heard, have argued this. but they're usually not explicit verses either way.
So, in other words, do you understand we have versions of the Torah and the Gospels and the prophets that predate the 7th century, right?
I do know that. Yes,
okay.
I do know that.
So that refutes this idea that there was this other uncorrupted one at the time of the Quran that they could have looked to.
No, so the Quran, okay, so the Prophet himself, if you read the Hadith corpus, have you read a lot of Hadiths or no?
Some, not a lot.
Yeah. So, okay, so the Prophet himself clearly tells people that the Torah, he says, don't believe everything in the Torah. Like he very clearly says, don't believe or disbelieve it, right, when it comes to certain things that you read in the Torah. And then you have Umar and Uthman and others that clearly say that when it comes to the corruption of the New Testament and the Old, it's the text that is corrupted itself. If you read, let's see, I can't remember the number of the Hadith in particular, but it is in Sahih Muslim and in Bukhari. So these are very authentic Hadiths, and they're widely transmitted as well.
Well, but what about the other Hadiths that say that it's impossible for the Torah to be corrupted or God's word to be corrupted? That's also in the Quran as well, right?
Well, when it comes to the question of divine speech and its corruptibility, I would say in relation to the divine essence is incorruptible. But
so wait a minute. So that means then that the Quran in time and space is also corruptible, right?
Somebody could have, if we didn't have an entire empire forging the book, basically, putting the book together, I would say it's quite a possibility that certain things could be non-prophetic in there. The actual argument for the preservation of the Quran is basically that itself, right? It's not the...
well, I mean, you understand preservation itself doesn't prove anything.
Yeah, I would agree with that, right? But I'm trying to tell you why we believe the Quran in particular is preserved, right? That's why I'm trying to give you that justification for why we do have that belief and hold to it.
Yeah, but that's not what I asked you. Was on what basis then, if Allah's speech in time and space in the written books can be corrupted, then wouldn't that undercut your view on the Quran?
No, it wouldn't. Because as I just said...
Well, you just said that the prior words of Allah can be corrupted in terms of their historical instantiations in the Torah, right?
Yes.
Okay, but not the Quran.
I'd say the Quran, when it comes to
historical so a double standard.
It's
right?
It's a total different justification.
No, it's not.
Like I'm literally.
No, it's not. You literally just admitted that Allah's words can be corrupted in terms of their physical instantiation, but not in the Quran. That's a double standard.
Not really. I would say that the reason why we hold that the Quran is preserved is because of totally different reasons. It
doesn't matter that you have totally different reasons if you've already admitted that Allah's words can be corrupted. Anyway, let's go to the Neoplatonism issues. I thought that's what you wanted to talk about.
That's also true. Okay. So I would say that when it comes to your epistemology and your problems with epistemology, Neoplatonic henology can just as easily justify the reliability of the faculties as
Neoplatonic what? What did you say?
Henology, starting with the monad.
What? But how does that? What does that have to do with Islam?
Within the Sufi and Neoplatonic traditions themselves, they clearly hold to Neoplatonic theology.
Okay. Why should I accept Neoplatonic metaphysics as an epistemic starting point?
Well, I would say that's necessary for intelligibility.
Why is that necessary for intelligibility?
Same reason you hold the nous to be necessary for intelligibility when you appeal to
Christ. Well, that's a faculty. That doesn't mean that it provides justification, because I believe in an element of the worldview existing. So what I'm asking is an epistemic justification question.
Yeah, I know. And you usually use the logos and nous as a justification for why our faculties...
those aren't justifications. The nous is not a justification. How could a faculty be a justification?
So you don't think that because God exists, that's why our faculties are reliable? That's not what you believe.
I do believe that, but I have a basis. But I have a basis. I have a basis in terms of revelational epistemology, which is not what you're arguing.
So you don't argue that God himself, in his very own essence and nature, would entail that your faculties are reliable?
No, God's essence is unknowable, so we don't believe that at all. But I would argue that
a personal God in your metaphysics as a justification.
Revelation is the basis for metaphysics.
Okay. So So you hold that because the book says so, therefore my faculties are reliable. Or the tradition says so as well.
No,
right?
I hold that the transcendental argument gives me a basis to believe in the reliability, not just of my faculties, but of the worldview as a whole.
Let me make this point. So you would appeal to the transcendental argument to justify from Scripture instead, right? Not from necessarily your metaphysics.
Well, the transcendental argument is an argument for an entire worldview, so it includes the whole. It includes the pieces of the worldview too, such as divine revelation, such as universals, such as categories. All of those things are part of the worldview. So one of the unique things about TAG is that it's a worldview specific and holistic argumentation. Thank you.
Okay, so why couldn't, right, a Sufi or somebody like that use the same justification for the reliability of their faculties?
Because it's not just an argument for the reliability of faculties, it's an argument for objectivity, universality, laws of logic, all those things which require a deity that is more than just a bare unity or a bare monad.
Why would you say that? Because this is now going into metaphysics.
Because, I mean, yeah, we can go into this argument can go in any direction, but if you want to take it in the metaphysics direction, that's fine with me, because a bare Unitarian deity cannot be a justification for why there's multiplicity in the world, how there's temporality in the world. If you're a consistent Neoplatonist, you have to say the world's an emanation and not a temporal creation. But everybody who believes the Bible, and I would assume the Koran too, unless you're some sort of Neoplatonist, which you may be if you're a Sufi, the world comes to be in time. It's not an eternal emanation.
Well, I think that if you talk to Khalil, for example, I think you've spoken to him, he thinks that the temporal world is actually created. And so do almost every other Platonist, that the world, like, the universe that we're talking about here is temporally created.
Well, okay, but
this is how about,
right?
Let's say, the first intellect or...
Well, some Neoplatonists necessarily do not. Many Neoplatonists. We can go to the history of Neoplatonism right here, and we can talk about how the world that we inhabit isn't created; it's an emanation.
Sure.
They do not believe create. So to make this very clear, creation, in our view, presupposes an intentional, personal God. The God of monad and Neoplatonism is not intentional, and he does not have a will by which he creates. And we can go to the Neoplatonic text right here. I have the expert on Neoplatonism, R.T. Wallace. In his book, he specifically has a chapter on the Neoplatonic deity, whether it's Porphyry or whether it's any of them, does not create. He does not possess a personal will. The movement of the emanations is a overflowing of the one. It is not a personal, intentional creation.
Okay, so when we speak about the one, I do agree that we only speak in respect to intellection, right? So when in the Enneads, for example, Plotinus says that the one willing itself is how we get these types of, like, let's say the first intellect, right?
Yeah, but it's not a personal God willing himself.
Now I have to ask that question. What do you mean by person?
Right, so this is why, again, right, this is why I was making that point to you in the comments, is that we're not Neoplatonists. The God of the Bible is the God who reveals himself in time and space. By the way, a Neoplatonic being cannot be in time and space. But the God of the Bible in the Hebrew text of the Torah steps into time and space. There's theophanies. They're not created angels. They're called Yahweh. They're called God. They're worshipped. They're called divine. So again, that's why I was arguing to you that Neoplatonism has nothing to do with our Trinitarian theology whatsoever. It's literally derived from the Hebrew text.
I actually did agree with you that you guys are, even though you do adopt certain Platonic views, in my opinion, like, let's say, views on inherent hierarchy.
Okay, you're right. That was you and the other guy. That was a reply to the other guy.
Yeah, I do think that you guys do adopt certain Platonic views. You adopt what you guys saw as, like, the good parts of Platonism, but then left what you guys thought contradicted Christianity, right?
Yeah, to a degree, but like I was saying, like, every one of the ecumenical councils ends up refuting some heresiarch who utilizes Neoplatonic dialectics to try to prove their position, right? So another element of this, I'm not trying to shift, but you could say, in a lot of, and this is not just Neoplatonism, in much of the Greek philosophical tradition, the one, the absolute, God, whatever we call it, it's opposite the world. Okay, we reject dialectics. So we have no dialectical philosophy. That's why we believe in a Trinity that has ultimacy of unity and multiplicity. It's not all a bare unity. And God's actions or attributes are actually infinite. So there's a balance of the one and the many in our position. I think that also resolves other metaphysical problems that other worldviews have. But it's a uniquely Trinitarian position where the persons of the triad have a mutual exchange of love and other attributes and energies such as divine glory. And that's why Jesus says in John 17, 1-5, that before the foundation of the world, he shared with the Father the eternal glory amongst the triad. So that means for us, there's certain attributes that are natural or necessary, such as glory, such as love, such as any attribute that's not contingent upon the created order. But for God to actually exercise providence or to exercise the power of creating, that's what Aristotle referred to as second actuality. That's actualizing the powers that he has. So we don't believe that God has always exercised necessarily every power that he has. He can exercise at will because he's a personal and intentional being. That's why when Jesus becomes incarnate, the second person of the Godhead steps into time and space. He willingly chooses not to actualize all of his powers to step into a mode of being in time and space. That's all absolutely impossible in a Neoplatonic scheme. And to turn that question to you, I would say if you did have a Neoplatonic scheme, now I've read some Sufi texts, and maybe you would agree with this. Do you believe that everything is a kind of manifestation of Allah, or do you believe that Allah is so transcendent that he really can't be revealed or manifested in time and space?
I would say that when it comes to Apophaticism, first of all, everything in a sense does reflect the divine attributes, quote unquote, right? But I would not say that everything in the world is God. I'm not a pantheist or a panentheist, right? I reject that type of view. That's what, if you read almost any Sufi metaphysician, like let's say Sheikh Ahmed Tijani or Ibn Arabi, they'll all reject pantheism.
Right.
Very explicitly. So
I didn't think you were pantheist, but my question, I guess, would be, so for us in Orthodox metaphysics, number one, the distinction between the attributes that are related only to the created order versus the attributes that are true from all eternity with or without a created order, such as love or glory. Those things were not contingent upon a world. But the exercise of, say, divine providence doesn't make sense in our view if he's not exercising that, if there's no world over which he's provident. So this would be the modal collapse point. This would be the point to where if God is eternally exercising, say, providence, then there's an eternal world over which he's exercised that providence. And so if there's an eternal world, then now we have a second God or second deity next to God, a dyad, whereby the created order is also eternal, just like God's eternal. So I would say that might be a problem depending upon how you conceive of the distinction between God's essence and his actions, if you believe there's a real distinction or not. And if there's no real distinctions, then I would say the position would fall into modal collapse. And that's why we don't believe in a bare Unitarian deity. We believe in a real personal triad.
I would say that is consistent because it's quite obvious that if you read Sufi metaphysics, we are necessitarians, right? If you hold to ADS, it does entail necessitarianism. You would agree with that, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So we would say that, let's say, the first intellect is eternal, but we wouldn't say the temporal world is eternal, right? So like the entire hierarchy of Platonism, right?
Yeah.
And so we would negate that in relation to the temporal world, but in relation to, like, let's say, the first intellect or Hakika Muhammadiyya, we would affirm that eternality. So I don't really see how that works.
So is the first intellect in a ontologically diminished status?
Yeah, it's dependent, right?
Okay, so you have multiple deities.
I would say that that's an impossibility, right? For one,
you just said it's dependent.
Yeah, it's dependent, right, upon the emanation of the one or the monad or God. But I would say at the same time, anything that, and this is like very classical Platonism, anything that comes from the one is subordinate to the one. So since they don't have the same essence, you can't call them God.
Right. And side question here, do you think that the Quran teaches this? I mean, does the Quran teach ancient Platonic metaphysics? Is that what's really revealed in the Quran? Are you there? You're muted.
Oh, okay. So I wouldn't say explicitly, because you can't have disagreements on how to interpret the Quran, but I would say that the Hadith corpus and things like this do give credence to the view of the Sufi in particular.
No, I'm saying
Right.
so all of this is obviously Greek metaphysics, right? And you don't think this was cribbed?
I don't think it's necessarily wrong that we
No,
hold to
cribbed.
intellect.
I didn't say right or wrong. Cribbed.
No, not really.
Okay. So you literally said are appealing to Plato and these texts, and you're saying that when the Quran is written, right, Muhammad, who is illiterate, this is not coming from that.
Yeah, I would not say that these ideas are coming from strict Platonism. I just said revelation, and revelation just corresponds to reality.
So the revelation that comes centuries after Plato and these people is not getting it from Plato, even though you're literally sitting here appealing to Plato.
Yeah, I would say that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that very
Okay. Yeah. All right. Anything else?
So, okay. I did have a problem.
So what if there's I know you're saying that, well, Plato says you can't call it God or whatever, but you just said that, I mean, there's an eternal second principle of intellect. How is that not two different things? How are
these are distinct things, because I think I said why earlier, why in Platonism they hold the...
No, I'm asking your position.
Yeah, this is the same position, basically.
But it's not from Plato.
I would not say that's per se from
Why
Plato.
are you appealing to Plato?
I'm not actually appealing. I don't think that...
You just appealed to Plato.
Didn't systematize
You
this.
just said
I would
it's...
actually make it
Okay. So how do you believe in one God if there's these multiple principles of diminished ontological status?
Because the nous is subordinate to the one. It's not. They don't have the
You
same
just
essence.
restated your position.
Yeah, I just stated the position because...
How is that
actually gave you
consistent with the claim that you only worship one God when there's multiple principles of diminished ontological status that you're calling God?
Because they don't have the same essence. Like, I'm only referring to the one, and like...
How
that
is it
essence
not
particular.
polytheism?
Because these are two distinct entities. Like, this is... And
Yeah,
one
thank
is
you.
inherently subordinate. They're not the same.
Polytheism,
entity.
exactly. Poly, that means many. Oh, man. Greetings from something. Yeah, so it's all Neoplatonic argumentation. It's all directly from Plato, but it's not from Plato. It's not Neoplatonic. And there's multiple entities that are not multiple entities. Greetings, what's up?
Hey, can you hear me, Dyer?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so my question is about the Photian Schism. That's like my first one. And it's not really an argument, it's just a few concerns I've got with the Eastern Orthodox position. So,
Yeah. Have you read Dvornik's book?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay. So Dvornik is one of the most famous Uniate scholars who basically goes back to, various Orthodox schisms and sort of regurgitates and revises, not regurgitates, revises the position of Rome. And that's why now Rome accepts these Eastern fathers as potentially saints.
Right, okay, yeah. Right, well, I suppose I'll just read that then.
Yeah, I mean, I would just defer to your own guys for that.
Yeah, right, yeah, okay, yeah, that's fair enough.
There's also another book, too, that Congar wrote after 900 years that touches on that from the Roman Catholic perspective, basically admitting that we can... I mean, this is why Rome has changed their position. I mean, John Paul II says you can revere these people as saints when they were heretics for centuries.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, I'll go look at that. So that kind of answers my first question already.
Before you can ask, hold on, you can ask the second question to the guy in the chat that's talking a bunch of smack. If you aren't going to come to debate, we're going to boot you. So Roman Catholic dude, Jay in the chat, come debate or you're gone. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So I've spent a lot of time looking at tag over the last few months.
Uh-huh.
And I think for a lot of people, it's kind of like a revelation. It's almost a eureka moment, because it's a new side to things that they haven't considered before, right? I mean, I think a lot of people use like natural theology straight away, and they never even consider this side of things. So it's been like interesting to go through this. And if I lay out my understanding of it, it's like a reductio argument. So if all the other possibilities are false, then the conclusion of the argument must be true, because none of the other arguments or arguments against it can possibly be, it couldn't possibly exist or possibly be true. So my question really is, how can you insert God into this? Because all the other worldviews are circular, right? So if we use like an empiricist worldview, the empiricist worldview doesn't make sense, because in order to validate...
Well, the argument is not that all the other worldviews are circular and ours is not. The argument is that every worldview is circular, so it becomes a question of who can give a coherent account of the worldview. So in other words, any worldview that posits self-evidence or foundationalist principles, as any Roman Catholic natural theology-based worldview would do, we're saying that that's not going to work. You're going to end up in some circularity, even on your principles of self-evidence. So the first point we make there is to say that your worldview is not actually self-evident and not actually foundationalist. You're actually violating the principles that you claim to hold to. And so if they have two options there, as say a Roman Catholic natural theology proponent, and this came up in the Trent debate, right? Trent said, no, I still believe in self-evidence. I'll use Descartes' cogito. And then what I argued in the debate was, well, you don't actually believe it's self-evident because you made appeals to other things to prove it. That means it's not self-evident. So if you don't believe in self-evidence, then you're you're into the boat that I want you to step into. You're in the position that I've been arguing, which is that at root, all positions will bottom out at ultimately appealing to some ultimate authority. And in that sense, at a paradigm level, be circular. That's the point. So we're not saying that we escape that dilemma. We're saying that at a paradigm level, every position has some bottoming out final authority to appeal to. So that's what TAG is saying. And TAG does involve in part a reductio internal critique. But it's not just that. You also have to present the positive case for our worldview, which is, well, our worldview is grounded in divine revelation. It's grounded in Christian metaphysics. It's grounded in the theology and the view of history and the grounding of the universals of logic and so forth in the divine mind. All of those things for us would function as the structure of how our web of belief works. And then we would say, if you compare that to the web of beliefs of any other worldview, the other worldviews can't give an account for their systems, or they bottom out at something contradictory or absurd, etc.
Right, okay. So, like, every single worldview, including your worldview, is a circular one.
At base level, yes. Every worldview will bottom out at something that is self-referencing. For everybody who's a natural theology self-evidence proponent, their bottomed out ultimate principles are whatever they think is self-evident. They're axioms. They're doxastically basic beliefs. And we're simply saying, well, that's arbitrary and it's also inconsistent. It doesn't work with Chisholm's criterion problem. It doesn't work with the... there's multiple critiques of it. For example, the Chisholm, if you're not familiar, the criterion problem says you can't have any knowledge claim without a theory of knowledge. But if you have a theory of knowledge, by necessity, you also have a knowledge claim because you claim to know the theory of knowledge. This is a dilemma for any self-evidence foundationalist proponent that they can't get out. There's literally no way out of that. Now, you've got nerds that think they can solve that or whatever, but they're missing the point that you can't have self-evidence without some level of arbitrariness. And the other critique you can make, which is, I think, equally as devastating, is if I ask you, okay, well, so some things are self-evident and some things are not? Yes. Well, that presupposes that you have some prior criteria or standard by which you list the self-evident things versus the non-self-evident things. And if that's the case, then there's a more fundamental criteria that undergirds the self-evidence criteria. Right,
yeah. No, that's a good answer. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. my question then would be...
By the way,
so
do you have the book, before you go on?
The book? Which book, sorry?
The Epistemology by W.J. Wood. It's a really good readable text on this. And I recommend that one because the chapter on foundationalism is really good. Like, all the stuff that you heard me critiquing Trent in the debate, like, it's in any standard epistemology text.
Right, I will look at that. Was that W.J. Wood?
Yes. Yeah, his book's really good.
Yeah, thank you.
It's very readable.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the problem. You don't really want to go in at the deep end and start reading things you don't fully understand, because you can, it just kind of, it feels distracting.
Well, the Green Bonjour book on epistemology is like a grad school textbook. So a lot of people who buy that find it very difficult. But I would say if you read the Wood book first, then you'll do better with the Bonjour book.
Right. Yeah, that was useful, yeah. So my question then would be, why does your argument get kind of like a concession? Why does your circularity receive a concession? Is it because yours begins with something that grounds the transcendental categories?
Well, it's not a concession, whereas we don't have to answer this problem. We're saying all worldviews are subject to fundamental circularity. So then the question is, well, then how would we prove any worldview? That's when it gets into coherence. That the worldview as a whole is coherent, has reasons for that worldview versus other worldviews. So we're not excluding ourselves. We're saying, no, we're also part of the same thing. We're all in the same boat. Right. If self-evidence is not true, if foundationalism is not true, then we're all in the same boat. Well, if we're all in the same boat, how are we going to judge between worldviews? The only way to judge between worldviews would be to compare the systems as a whole and see which ones are coherent, which ones work, and which ones don't.
Right, and there has to be some worldview because knowledge has to exist because...
everybody necessarily will have some basic beliefs in the three elements of a worldview, right? Everybody will have some basic belief on metaphysics, ethics, and epistemology.
Yeah, okay, and then I guess my final point would be, what would you say to someone who would deny the existence of transcendental categories altogether?
Well, I mean, you could go that route, but you would be in an even more difficult situation because transcendental categories are the things that undergird the possibility of predication at all. So if you deny those things, you're in an even deeper boat of trying to figure out, you're in the deeper waters of trying to figure out how predication is possible at all. I mean, in other words, they're not things that we're making up. We're saying that transcendental categories are the preconditions for the possibility of predication or knowledge at all. So if you want to deny those things, it'd be like saying that, in order to have a cake, I necessarily need these ingredients. And then I say, well, what if I deny the ingredients? Well, you're not going to have a cake.
Yeah. No, that's great, yeah. Thank you for answering that, yeah.
Yeah, I would say, too, I'll try to remember to send you a couple of FDA's papers because he also touches on these subjects very well. Let's see. Now, the dude talking smack in the chat... are you here? I don't see who you are. Maybe you're this guy. Young Catholic. What's up?
Hello.
So, Revel, if you're not going to come chat, just get booted. What's up, man?
What's up? I just had a question, not like a debate or anything. Just wanted to ask. I'm Catholic, by the way. But what's the Eastern Orthodox position on baptizing non-Eastern Orthodox or rebaptizing in a sense? Is that allowed? Because I know the Catholic position is that only certain denominations have valid baptisms. What's the Eastern Orthodox position?
It's a case-by-case basis on the decision of economia that's up to the local bishops.
Okay. I mean, wouldn't that be like a contradiction that certain bishops... Is it the Eastern Orthodox position that the bishops have the authority to make that decision?
Absolutely. Yeah, the ultimate interpreters of the canons and their application are the local episcopate.
Okay. I mean, I only had one question, so I don't...
Okay, sure. No, that's fine. Appreciate it. Let's see. I don't know where. So how can you join? The link is in the show description, and it's literally been linked in the chat a million times. So where's the Roman Catholic people that are talking smack? Like, they're the ones that I want them to come. Where are they at? So you'll have to tell me who you are, because there's like 20 people, 14 people requesting to speak. So I don't know who you are. Peter, what's up? Peter.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, man.
Hey, I have a question about John 6:40.
Okay.
Basically, I had a moment where I was looking at a picture of Jesus, and while I was looking at the picture, my spiritual eyes were open, and I came to the realization that he was God.
Mm-hmm.
And I believed that he was God in that moment while looking at him. Is that in accordance with John 6:40?
Well, I think John 6:40 is a text that obviously shows the deity of Christ. So, but I mean, in Orthodox view, we don't typically rely on mystical experiences because we can fall into prelest. So we always guard people against trusting in those kinds of things. Not to say that they can't happen, but I wouldn't rest my dogmas or my beliefs on a personal experience like that. I would rather say that the text itself says that, rather than trying to, fall back on some sort of a mystical experience.
I see what you're saying. What would your idea of what John 6:40 means?
Yeah, it means that Christ, in our nature, even though he's already by nature equal to the Father and has all the same powers as the Father, as he says in John 5, he's saying that also in his status as human being, that he also is granted that power in our nature. So essentially the Son of God, who is also the Son of Man, now has in our nature the ability to raise everyone up and give them eternal life. So shows the deity of Christ. It shows that Christ is the one that will, by his divine power, raise everyone from the dead at the resurrection, and that he will judge the living and the dead, which he could only do if he were divine.
It says that everyone who looks to or looks on the Son. What does that mean to you?
It means look in faith. I don't think it's necessarily literally saying that the physical movement of the eyes. It's saying look in the sense of look in faith. Ali Malik. You gotta unmute, man. Ali. What's up, dude? Did you turn your mic on? We can't hear you. Turn your mic on and come back, and I'll let you back in. Fazlan Ahmad, what's up? Hello?
Am I audible?
You there?
Okay, so
I can't hear you, man. What's up?
Yeah. So I am fine. So I have a doubt. So recently you had a debate with a
What?
Muslim in the. So yeah, I have a doubt in Christianity.
A doubt?
So yeah, doubt means so when you say the attribute of God, attribute of Elohim. So what do you say about that one? Are they eternal? Like you talk about Islam, okay? When it comes to Allah, you talk about the attribute of Allah. So what do you say the attribute of Elohim, the God of Old and New Testament?
I mean, we say it's always been the Trinity. Elohim is a reference to the Trinity.
Okay, but what about the attribute of Elohim? Like his speech, his wisdom, his power, his love.
Yeah, that's
How are they?
what I was explaining in the beginning was that there's different actions and different attributes. So some of them are actualized or done from all eternity, like love or glory. Other attributes are attributes or actions particular and relevant only to the created order, such as divine providence. God does not actualize divine providence from all eternity because that would require an eternal world. However, he has always had the power of divine providence or of creating, even though he didn't eternally create.
Okay, but simply put together, like, are they created or are they uncreated? His attributes.
No, God has no created parts or attributes.
Okay, they are uncreated. So, like in Islam, we say the same thing. They are uncreated.
Correct.
Okay. So, in that case, they are part of him or they are separate from him? His attribute.
We don't believe that distinctions entail parts, composition, or division.
No, I'm asking, they are within himself or are they separate? His attribute.
Well, we believe in what's called the essence energy distinction. So they're distinct, but they're really him. It's a both and, not an either or.
Okay, but as an example, when it comes to Jesus, Jesus is the attribute of God. Jesus is the word of God. So that is an attribute. So in that sense, Jesus should be separate.
No, we do not believe that it's an attribute. We believe that he's a distinct person or hypostasis. So he's the second person of the Trinity, not an attribute.
But his speech is attribute, right? The word of God is attribute of God. The wisdom of God is attribute of God, right?
It is both an attribute and in this case a person as well, because in our view the attributes have a manifestation that happens in each person in a unique way and in a unique mode. So the speech of God is not just an attribute, in this case it is also a person.
Okay, then how about the wisdom of God? It is an attribute or it is a person?
Right, the scriptures identify Christ as the wisdom of God as well as both an attribute and a person.
Okay, but there are so many attributes like the counsel of God, the glory of God.
Right, and so my basis is what divine revelation tells us, not can I make every attribute a person. We don't believe every attribute is a person. What I'm saying is there are two different things going on here. One is the Trinity, and then the movement of those attributes or energies in the way that they manifest or the way that they move. So you could say, for example, the Holy Spirit is the love, or the manifestation of the love of God. I am not identifying the Holy Spirit as the love of God, because love is an attribute common to Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but he's uniquely manifested by the person of the Spirit.
Okay, so what is your criteria? So what is the criteria to attribute to become a person?
Divine revelation.
Yeah, but what is the criteria?
Divine revelation is the criteria.
Yeah, divine revelation, but as an example, okay, now, if I go to the word of God, so you say word of God is a person, also it's attribute, also a person.
No.
So
the divine revelation, I mean what's in, for example, the Torah and the prophets. That's where we get the doctrine of the Trinity from. It doesn't come from Greek philosophers, not invented by Constantine or Paul. It's in the Torah.
Yeah, I got that point. But as an example, the same Bible talk about the wisdom of God, so the glory of God. So when it comes to glory of God, how you say that is not a person? How you get to that conclusion? The glory of God is not a person, but the wisdom. And
all right. So if you read, I understand what your question is. If you read Ezekiel 1-10, glory is a attribute, but is also manifested as the person of the Son. So our starting point is not 99 names or all of God's attributes. We start with the person of the Father, the generation of the Son, and the procession of the Spirit. Those three persons uniquely manifest every attribute in a unique way. That's what I'm saying. So there could never be new persons. We can't come up with a fourth. There's not 99 persons or whatever. Each attribute moves in a certain way from the Father through the Son and in the Spirit. That movement is eternal. That's our Trinitarian doctrine.
Yeah, I got that point, but what is your criteria? Like, as an example, when I talk a Christian, okay,
the criteria is that divine revelation states and gives me the grounding, first and foremost, to begin the theology with the theology of the persons of the Trinity. So if there's, let me explain that. So in the Old Testament, for example, we have Yahweh, we have his angel messenger who comes in time and space, who manifests as his messenger, as his angel, as his face, as his glory, as his wisdom, as his word. We think that's the Son, that's Jesus in the Old Testament. And his Spirit is present all throughout. So these three persons or hypostases are manifested all throughout the Torah and the prophets. That's our criteria and starting point for where we would then look to, well, then what are these attributes and how are they manifested?
Okay, but when it comes to Spirit of God, Bible Old Testament mentioned there's 7 separate spirit, right? So if the 7 is Spirit of God, then how can you end up in Trinity?
Now, the 7 spirits are said to be attributes or operations which are common to all 3. That's not the same thing as the Holy Spirit. 2 different things. Because when you look at the 7 spirits, they're listed in Isaiah. So Isaiah says the spirit of wisdom, the spirit of knowledge, the spirit of fear of the Lord, all of those are on the person of Christ, because that passage in Isaiah 11 is about the incarnation. Those are common attributes that are called the 7 spirits of God. It doesn't mean that God literally has 7 Holy Spirits. That's distinct from the person of the Holy Spirit.
But in the 7 spirit, the Spirit of God is mentioned. That same spirit in Genesis, right? So you identify that as a separate person.
Right, but that's not right. So it's from Isaiah 11, and it says that the Spirit of the Lord will rest upon him. That's the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit in the baptism of Christ rests upon him. I know you don't believe this, but I'm saying that it's not inconsistent within our text. So what Isaiah 11 is predicting is a messianic prediction, right? There shall come forth a rod from the stem of Jesse. That's David. Jesse's David's dad. So this is talking about the Davidic lineage of the Messiah. We think that this branch is Christ. The Spirit of the Lord will rest upon him. That's the Holy Spirit. That's what happens in Christ's baptism. The Spirit of wisdom, understanding, counsel, might, knowledge, and fear of the Lord, right? So this 7 here is just a symbolic number of both the Holy Spirit and the attributes that are common to all 3 persons of the Trinity.
Oh, yeah, I got that part, but what I'm telling is it's mentioned 7 spirit, but the 2nd spirit is the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God. So
right, it's just a symbolic, right? There's not 7 attributes. It's just a symbolic number of perfection. There's other attributes that are common.
Like okay, but okay. So, but when it comes to angel of God, like I think in the Gospel of Luke it is mentioned angel Gabriel is the angel of God. Right,
but angel is a word that just means messenger, right? So in the Old Testament, when it's used, sometimes it's Gabriel, like in Daniel, and it specifies that Gabriel came to Daniel. Other times it's specified that it's Michael at the end of Daniel. For example, Michael, the archangel, defends the nation of Israel. But in other places, the angel messenger, and again, it just means messenger. That can be a created or an uncreated messenger, and that's why we say in so many places that the angel is called God, called Yahweh, and worshipped in the Old Testament.
Okay, but there's no explicit evidence, right? The angel of God is Jesus. I think.
Say that again.
Something.
I couldn't hear you. Say that again.
Yeah, do we have any explicit evidence the New Testament says Jesus is the angel of God?
Yeah, absolutely. Jesus in John 5-9 identifies himself as that angel in those chapters. He says that he's the one that appeared on Mount Sinai in the burning bush in Exodus 3, where the angel says, "I am that I am." Exodus 23 says that the name of Yahweh is in that angel messenger. So he's called Yahweh. And remember, God doesn't give his glory to another. And yet here he is saying that this angel messenger is Yahweh. So Jesus also says that Abraham looked forward to believe in him. John 8.
But they are not explicit, right? I think
No, it's explicit. He explicitly says that he's the one that talked face to face with Moses. He says no one sees the Father in it at any time. This is John 5-9, right? John 5, he says no one sees the Father at any time. And yet Moses talked face to face with God. Who was Moses talking to if no one sees the Father? Jesus is saying that he is the one talking face to face with Moses, and that's why he tells the Pharisees that you have to honor and worship the Son as you honor and worship the Father. And that's why the Pharisees then want to stone Jesus in John 5.
But when it comes to like Moses talk God with face to face, that the text chapter itself says he did not talk face to face, that is, he talked with the glory of God, right? That's he.
Well, it says in Exodus both that Moses talked face to face with God. It says that no one can see God face to face. So the resolution to this dilemma is that Jesus is the face of God that talked to Moses face to face, and that's the argument Jesus is making in John 5.
Okay, you can have that opinion, but in my
It's real. I'm going to move on. I'm not trying to be rude. It's just really hard to hear what you're saying. So we're going to move on to the next. But thank you for those questions. We'll move on to the next one. Welsh Papist, what's up? Faith alone, Protestants, call in if you. The chat is not for you to spam gibberish. Call in or you're booted.
Can you hear me, Jay?
Yes, sir.
I just come with just a few questions in regards to Orthodox theology. I'm a Catholic. I'm just curious about a couple of things.
Okay.
Obviously, you would reject sort of the Augustinian view of original sin. The Eastern tradition always did, and I'm just curious as to why that is, because like say passages like Psalm 50, where David talks about my mother bore me in sin, or say Romans 5, for example. I'm just curious, what is the Eastern perspective on passages such as those?
Yeah, right. The Augustinian view is bound up with his doctrine, which he's very explicit on. I can give you all the references where he says that all men were in Adam as in an archetype. He says this in City of God explicitly. That means for him that not only are we in Adam in potentia, but we're also guilty of Adam's sin because we are in him as in an archetype. This leads Augustine to his mass damnata doctrine, that all men are damned as a damned mass, a ball of damnation in Adam. And thus he thinks that there's inherited guilt for infants. Roman Catholic theology in the late Middle Ages softens this with the limbo of infants and so forth, but I think they still retain some of these principles. This is what leads Roman Catholicism to things like the Immaculate Conception doctrine. They think that for Mary to be pure, she would also have to have been conceived immaculately. We don't believe any of that. We do think she's a spotless virgin. She didn't commit any actual sins. But all of the Eastern Church Fathers are almost unanimous in saying that infants do not bear personal guilt. So does that mean they're Pelagian? No, they just, as you said, simply didn't accept or didn't believe in the Augustinian doctrine of inherited guilt. And it's also bound up with Augustine's collapsing of person into nature, both in the Trinity and in humanity. In Orthodox theology, if you read St. Maximus, for example, guilt is only something that can be had as by an individual person. So the mode of willing that you do as an individual hypostasis is the only way that you could ever be guilty of something. This is why Ezekiel, for example, says that the Son shall not bear the sins of the Father. Well, how do we explain this? Well, in Romans 5, the text that you mentioned, if you read Meyendorff's critique of Augustine, and this is also in Pomazansky's book too, by the way, he has a whole section about the Augustinian doctrine of original sin. This is a standard Rocor dogmatic theology book. He says that the mistake that Augustine made was assuming that all men sinned in Adam, when the text in the Greek reads, all men sinned because of Adam's sin. So it doesn't mean that we're guilty of Adam's sin. It means the effects of Adam's sin pass on to us. And so in that sense, yes, we have the contagion, we have the deprivation of grace. We agree with all those things, which is why we baptize infants, but we do not believe that infants are guilty of personal actual sin.
Thanks for that answer. So the next one would be when you were.
By the way, before you go to that, I've just remembered I do have a 3-hour talk on this topic, going through the text of Augustine and others. If you're interested in a longer version of this,
I shall look into it. I'm sort of new to your stuff, so anyway. What was I about to say? Yes, you had a discussion with Muslim Lantern yesterday, and you made a case for monarchical Trinitarianism, which I've come across in, say, St. Basil and the two St. Gregory's,
right, it's
for
a
example.
Cappadocian, yeah, right.
Yeah, but I'm just curious before them, because just from my own personal reading of the Church Fathers so far, you just say if you were to go before them, who else would you say held to the monarchical?
I think Irenaeus teaches it. I think you can see it in Ignatius, where he talks about the threefold structure in the church, mirroring Father and Son. I think it's pretty consistent. The only time I can think of this really becoming confused is in the argument. So after Origen, if you look in First Principles, he starts arguing that what divine simplicity means is what Neoplatonists mean. And so after Origen, you get a tendency, even Augustine, when he argues for Filioque, for example, he's basically cribs on the Trinity certain passages from the Aeneads. So this idea of simplicity that passes into Plotinus and others really gets regurgitated in Origen and Augustine, and becomes more and more popular in the West to start your Trinitarian theology with the simplicity of the essence, based on, quite literally, a Platonian definition from Origen's First Principles, Chapter 1. I think it's around 14, but it's Book 1 of First Principles. And then it becomes pretty standard for people to utilize that as the working definition of what simplicity has to be. And if you read Bradshaw's book, Aristotle, East and West, as well as Radogowitz's book on divine simplicity and the Cappadocians, they point out that the Cappadocians don't first and foremost utilize this Platonian definition of simplicity. For them, simplicity first and foremost is whether God acts or is acted upon. So that's a reference to simplicity. That's a reference to what characterizes the divine nature, its impassibility. It's not changeable. But when we speak of God acting in the world, that's the essence-centered distinction which characterizes the Cappadocians as well. And so they begin with distinctions in the Trinity, not with the essence in the Trinity.
Thank you. I just got two more questions, by the way. The next one would be in regards to the Nicene Creed, i.e. the Filioque. Obviously, the Filioque was rejected in the East because of the manner in how it was placed into the Creed. So obviously, the one reason was part of the ecclesiology, obviously. But what was more the theological reasons for the rejection of the Filioque as well?
Well, the classic text on this is the Mystagogy of St. Photius, and then another I would highly recommend, even more than that one, is the reprinting of St. Gregory Palamas's book, Apodictic Treatise on the Holy Spirit, because what Palamas does is really build on the argumentation in Photius's critique of the Filioque and take it to the next level. So he goes way more in depth with apodictic logic and argumentation. And those two books, I think, are essential. So I would recommend reading those two to see what they were arguing in Photius's day and Palamas's day.
Thank you. Last question would be, funny enough, about Palamas in a sense. Palamas is obviously the first, what would be the right way to put it? The first person to really put forward the essence-energy distinction of the...
No, I don't think that's true at all.
No, I mean as in full disclosure, in full writing, so to speak.
It's all throughout on the Orthodox faith. I mean, John of Damascus's Christology is all premised on the essence-centered distinction. St. Maximus's dispute with Pyrrhus is all premised on the essence-centered distinction. That whole book is based on the argument, the essence-centered distinction.
Did you say what's his name? St. John of Damascus?
Yeah, the third book of On the Orthodox Faith. Chapter 15 and on is all essence-centered distinction applied to Christology. St. Maximus's entire book, Disputation with Pyrrhus, is all based on essence-centered distinction. So what I'm pointing out is that essence-centered distinction is way more clear and perceptible in Christology even than it is in Trinitarian theology.
Just as well, a small caveat question for yourself, Jay, because I'm aware that you were Roman Catholic once upon a time. Obviously, what convinced you of the essence-energy distinction over, say, divine simplicity as taught by the Thomists like Aquinas and such?
Going through a lot of essays and articles debating it. Energetic Procession had about a 40-page comment debate many years ago where they were debating this back and forth. That was one of the first things that got me questioning it. I read Philip Sherrard's book, Greek East, Latin West, and the essay in there on the energies was really another thing that was moving me in that direction. I started reading the Cappadocians at length, and I noticed that it's not just letter 234. It's pretty consistent in all the Cappadocians to argue on the basis of the essence-centered distinction, including Basil's on the Holy Spirit, including Basil's against Eunomius. And then when I moved into reading a lot of St. Cyril, noticing that St. Cyril makes use of the essence-centered distinction all the time. It's fundamental to his argumentation about how the Eucharist is the real presence. Then moving into reading a lot of St. Maximus and seeing that Maximus clearly teaches the essence-centered distinction all over the place. John Damascus teaches it. When I noticed the debate between when Aquinas rejects John Damascus on the essence-centered distinction explicitly, this is in his work De Veritate, Aquinas cites Maimonides as the reason why he rejects the essence-centered distinction in John Damascus. So that was very telling to me where this idea was coming from. Classical theism, Maimonides, Plotinus, etc. It really has nothing to do with what's argued in terms of the Old Testament. And that's where the real clincher was. I read Bradshaw's essay on essence, energy, what kind of distinction, and then I read his book, Aristotle, East and West. and then all of his other essays where he talks about the manifestation of divine glory. And then I think the main final clincher was the theophanies. The theophanies are clear as day, God in time and space. It's literally rejected and not possible on a Thomistic Roman Catholic ADS schema, and that's why they all teach that the theophanies are created angelic beings, just like Muslims, just like Jews.
Thanks for your time, Jay. Cheers.
Absolutely, yeah. Leviticus 9. Remember this, guys, when we had the two Thomists the other day call in, and we had this argument. What did we get? Jewish Muslim exegesis. They're worshiping an angel. The glory of God is an angel, a created being. There's no created God. There's no created glory. You can't worship creatures. You can't worship angels. And by angels, I mean created angelic beings. You can't worship Michael and Gabriel. You can worship the angel of the covenant, who's Jesus, because he's not a creature. He's the eternal Son of God. Aaron lifted up his hand towards the people, and he blessed them, and he came down from the sin offering and the burnt offering and the peace offering. Moses and Aaron went near the tabernacle, came out and blessed the people, and the glory of Yahweh appeared to all. Fire came out from before the Lord, consumed the burnt offering. What does Paul say in Hebrews? Our God is a consuming fire. This is not a created fire. God has no created fire. This is the uncreated light and fire of God, John 1. Uncreated light, John 1, versus created light, Genesis 1. Matthew 17, uncreated light emanates from the resurrected, or from the transfigured Christ. That same uncreated light is the same uncreated light and glory here. What do the Israelites do? Do they say, thank you, Yahweh, for a created image of angelic glory? No, they say, fall down on their face and worship God. This passage is so adamantly clear to refute the stupidity of the Roman Catholic Thomists, and that's why I, again, shared this paper the other day. Bodies of God. I'll just get the quotes up for you, because I have it on my desktop. All right, hopefully you can see this if you're looking on YouTube. Summary and conclusion. Aquinas deals with anthropomorphic descriptions and images more directly. Whether God is depicted in dimensions, hands, eyes, etc., standing, or in the case of Isaiah, it is not God himself, because God is absolutely simple and God is spirit. God cannot manifest in time and space. And again, they're so silly, these Thomists, they don't even realize that this undercuts the incarnation. And what is Aquinas' view? Well, contrasted to Summers, it is the opposite of Summers. Hence why we always reference the Summers book. So hopefully you can see that. Now let me find you the actual full paper here. I had it pulled up the other day. Let me see if I can find it. Bodies of God. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor. No, that's not it. Here it is. Aquinas and Sommer on Bodies of God, the paper by Richard Wilson here. That's a necessary read for illustrating this principle, this point. which is that the Thomistic ADS doctrine in terms of denying the theophanies, which is explicit. Remember that guy that called in the other day that said, "Oh, I don't think Aquinas denies the theophanies." Yeah, he does. So you have no idea what you're talking about. This paper is good in contrasting these two views. Now, again, Somer is not Orthodox. Why are we recommending a Jewish guy? Because Somer is arguing that Hebrew revelation, contrary to his own rabbinic traditions, is admitting that there's distinct hypostases in God. There is a real multiplicity that is not just conceptual or distinction or virtual, but that whether it's the Old Testament theophanies or whether it's the unique doctrine of divine immanence and transcendence in the Jewish Hebrew revelation, God is not a sole unitary being. In fact, the notion that distinction necessarily entails composition and division and that God must be a generic unity is more characteristic of the Maimonides period of Judaism. So while I'm not saying that there are no Jews prior to Maimonides who believed in a Unitarian perspective, the point of all of these books and of the opening statement in the Daniel Hakikachu debate, my first debate with him, not the one with Sam Shamoun, the first debate, was to simply demonstrate that modern Jewish scholarship is admitting that at the time of Christ, Judaism did not believe in a sole generic Unitarian God. The Hebrew revelation believed, based on all of these theophany texts, this is what Somer goes through. For example, Yahweh turned his face to Gideon in the book of Judges. If God can't be in time and space, how the heck is he going to turn his face to Gideon? How the heck is Jacob going to wrestle with Yahweh? Jesus in John 2 identifies himself as the one wrestling with Jacob. So, the point is, I know that Muslims don't accept any of these texts, but Muslims often make the argument that Jews are Unitarians and they don't believe in Jesus, and if Jesus was a Messiah, they would have accepted him. Well, first of all, that's fallacy, because you can be hard-hearted and not accept him. Secondly, it's not true that the Jews all rejected him, because the entire first foundation of the church and the first 10 books, 10 chapters of Acts is all thousands of Jews. All the apostles are Jews. So that's also not true. Secondly, Second Temple Judaism was not monolithic in its Unitarian teaching. And this is not just Somer that admits this. It's all these other Jewish texts as well that admit this. Okay? You see how this is why this argument is so powerful. Alan Siegel's Two Powers in Heaven. Boyarin's Borderlines. Schaeffer's two books. Or he's got another one, but Two Gods in Heaven. The Jewish Gospels. This one deals largely with Daniel 7, I think. Yeah, Daniel 7, where the Messiah, Son of Man, comes and presents himself before the Ancient of Days. That's clearly two distinct persons. Now, to be clear, because I know we have a lot of slow boys, the word God is not a proper noun. It can refer to different things. So when it says two gods or two powers, it's just noting that Jews at the time of Christ, many of them acknowledged and recognized that the Old Testament revelation is not a strict Unitarian deity. It does not mean polytheism in the sense of many, many gods. We do not believe that. We believe that there's only one God, the Father, and that he has shared that divine nature with the Son and with the Spirit. So in terms of the divine nature, in terms of the indwelling of the persons, there are not many gods. There is only one God. Hence the Nicene Creed says, we believe in one God, the Father Almighty. Now, there's a lot of people in the chat yipping and yapping. Are these people coming to debate? Guys, mods, if there's any mods, if the people keep yapping and they won't come debate, just boot them. Next up, let's see. We got some people been waiting for a long time, so let's see who's been waiting for a long time. Thorn? Thorn, are you there? Get on mute, man.
Can you hear me, Jay?
Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you for having me. I recently discovered you, and I've been waiting for this. I just have a question regarding predestination. I'm trying to piece it all together in terms of predestination, God's knowledge, God's will, and how does it come into play in our free will?
Right. So the Orthodox view believes right. So Orthodox Christianity does not believe in Calvinism. It does not believe in a hard determinism. We believe that God is sovereign. He does know all things, but God has also created a world where there are secondary causes. So you can read book 1 of John Damascus on this, where he talks about foreknowledge. He talks about God creating a world where there are secondary causes. Many Muslims don't believe that. They believe in a form of occasionalism because they think that there's secondary causes. This would detract from God's power and causality. But we do believe that creatures do have the ability to have real causal powers, real causation in the world. Now, in contrast to Calvinism, we look at texts like Ephesians 1 and we note that that was written to a visible community. It's not written to the invisible elect. If it's written to a visible community, then Paul is calling that whole group quite literally the predestined. So this whole idea of Calvinism that ultimately these verses are written only to the secret elect is just simply not true. And also it violates a lot of Christology. So if Christ has two wills, two natures, and two energies, then the fullness of humanity requires that human nature have its own will and energy. So the fall and depravity cannot mean that man lost its natural will and natural energy. So that's the Orthodox view. And Calvinists typically begin their theology from the divine determination, the divine decree, and then they do soteriology, and Trinity and Christology are all downstream from that. We think that's all wrong-headed. Trinity and Christology comes first. That then determines soteriology. And that's why the predestined is seen through largely a Christological lens. Armor.
Hello?
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to speak to you about what you said to Black Sufi, if you remember him.
Uh-huh.
He was on here a couple minutes ago.
Okay.
He was talking about his Neoplatonic view of, emanation from the One. So I heard you say that if the first intellect or the, Muhammadan reality, if it's eternal, that would make it a second God. But I just wanted to say, for Islamic philosophers and for Sufis, we don't identify divinity with eternality or accidental necessity. For us, divinity is only identified with essential necessity. And if that's the case, then the first intellect being eternal or necessary in existence in terms of broad logical necessity, that doesn't make it divine. It still makes it a creature. So we don't have multiple gods, basically.
So now, but what you're doing is you're taking things that are elements of the created order, like multiplicity, temporality, and you're giving it divine attributes.
No, because, for example, necessity in the first cause in God is essential, right? But in the first intellect, it's accidental. So that that shared necessity.
Well, okay, let's get more basic than this. How do you know that? How do you know that it's accidental and versus necessary?
Well, we have knowledge of the essence existence distinction, right? So,
but where did you derive this knowledge? Is it from Plato? Now, remember, he said Plato, but it's not from Plato.
No, I don't believe it's from Plato. For me, I get my views from Ibn Sina.
Where did he get them?
Well, we believe the essence existence distinction is a self-evident truth because you can...
Oh, how do you know that's self-evident?
Yeah, I know you're going to run the criterion problem, but I don't accept that because...
Oh, you don't accept it. So your answer is you don't accept it.
Yeah, because I just argue for epistemic finitism.
Okay, how does that resolve the criterion problem?
Because the criterion problem assumes that there is a criterion prior to the first principles of knowledge, but epistemic finitism shows that there cannot be a criterion prior to the first principles.
Okay, how do you know that there cannot be that?
Because epistemic finitism is true.
So it's self-evident because this other thing which is self-evident. So you can just tack on all the things that are self-evident, right?
Well, eventually, do you have a response to
So exactly, I just critiqued it.
No, do you have a response to it?
No, now you're changing it. Yeah. The response is that you just tacked on another self-evident principle.
No,
you missed the whole point of the critique. Yeah, you did. No. You just said no because this other thing is self-evident.
No, because
that is what you said.
Can I speak?
That is what you said.
Can I speak?
Is that not what you said? This other thing is also self-evident.
No, epistemic finitism has arguments for it.
And the argument was this other thing is self-evident.
No.
That is what you argued.
No.
No. That is what you said.
The argument for epistemic finitism is that if we have knowledge of something, that knowledge can either be dependent...
And I said, how do you know that that's the case? And you said, because it's self-evident.
Well, we certainly do have knowledge of things.
I said, how do you know that that second principle is the case? And you said it's self-evident.
What second principle?
The proposition you just stated. You said, we know it because of this. And I said, how do you know that second thing you just said? And you said, because it's self-evident.
Yeah, we know what.
Yeah. So the second thing is also the self-evident thing is true because this other self-evident thing is true.
No, I didn't say that.
You did.
I didn't.
You're a sophist. You just said that.
Can I speak? If we have knowledge of anything, any given proposition, say X, right?
How do you know that that's true? I know. I'm saying that proposition. How do you know that proposition is true?
Well, for example, tautological statements, are those not true?
Well, tautology doesn't tell me anything about reality and how it works in the world. So you can say it's true by it's true by definition, but I'm saying, how do you know that something true by definition is applicable here?
It can still be a knowledge claim.
Okay. How do you know?
Because of epistemic finitism.
Because it's self-evident. Yeah, so it's a circle. Good job. Circle. Circle.
Epistemic finitism is not circular.
You're telling me that, and I said, how do you know that? Then you gave this other principle, and I said, how is that principle? How do you know that principle? And you said it's self-evident.
Because your epistemology is...
My epistemology doesn't matter. I'm asking yours. Forget my epistemology. Yours.
Because you just presuppose your religion to be true.
No. So here he goes. He deflects away from the epistemic critique to, because your religion, you think it's true. No, you didn't. You didn't answer. You said this other thing, which is self-evident. Falling into the very thing that it doesn't... the very thing you think it answers, it doesn't answer. And then you deflect to, you think your position is self-evident. I don't think my position is self-evident. I don't believe in self-evidence. So get out of here with that sophistry. You don't solve the criterion problem by saying that, well, I have this finitude position that relies on this thing. And then when I ask you, well, then how do you know that position is true from that thing? And then you say it's that thing is self-evident. That's a circle. So it doesn't resolve. And there's a lot of these people out there that think they're resolving the criterion problem by saying this other thing. And they're missing the point of the criterion problem. I mean, you might think that resolves it, but the thing that you appealed to, you just said again, is self-evident. And by the way, beyond the criterion problem is the other problem I mentioned, which is just as devastating, which is that how do you know the things that are self-evident versus the things that are not? That's a more prior principle. Okay, we lost that other dude. Marcel. I'm you.
Yo, Jay, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I just had a question. This is a question that I just want to give the benefit of the doubt. You do know that the Sunnis do believe that the Quran is uncreated, right?
Correct.
So I just want to know, they believe that Gabriel is a created being.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to know, how the uncreated words is, able to be comprehended by a created being and give to Muhammad.
Yeah, I mean, I've asked that question many times. How do you escape this question when you say, 42 and 110, Allah is nothing like the created order? Okay, well, if Allah is nothing like it, and Allah does not enter into time and space, as many of them believe, then how does this message or these words of Allah translate into the created form of the Quran?
Yeah, so that's a valid argument, right? I can make that argument, right? I just want to give the benefit of the doubt.
That's what?
I just want to give the benefit of the doubt because I just have this, this argument. But again, they say Jibril had this kind of ability to, comprehend the words of Allah and give to Muhammad.
Okay, well, saying that he had the ability to do it doesn't tell us how it's possible given their metaphysical scheme. So that's an ad hoc rescue.
Yep, you're right. And there was one other thing that I want to ask you, that you know that the atheists also believe in something called fatalism, right? Everything is just pre-written by an angel.
Yeah,
and
they believe in a hard determinism, correct.
Yeah, so if that is the case, then why someone has to be a Muslim? Because one day suddenly Allah can just like take over your mind, body, and just like make you do whatever you like.
Yeah, sure.
So
I mean, many of them are occasionalists, which is even more an extreme position, that at every second Allah is destroying and recreating the world, because there cannot be secondary causes. There cannot be creaturely causes, because for creatures to have causal power would detract from Allah's sovereignty. That's how silly this position is. And it's also just goes back to like pagan fatalism. Now, keep in mind, like what we're talking about is not hidden. It's not new. They have been critiquing each other on these issues where, for example, here, Critique of the Palmyrian Creed, this whole book is about how all the Salafi argumentation about parts and attributes, shins and all this stuff, hands, that it's anthropomorphic heresy. They are making an analogy between God and Allah and the created order. And this whole book is about in what degree you can and can't do that, and how it's shirk. So, in other words, Ibn Taymiyyah has a doctrine of concurrence, right? Where Allah has a hand. We don't know the modality of a hand, but it's a real hand in some way. But it's nothing like the created hand of the world that the people have in the world. So how is that? It's silly, right? All this stuff is so silly, but it's given this air of like, sophistication. Try again.
So don't just kick me off this time because I disagree with you.
No, I didn't. I removed you because you're not answering the question. You're just talking in circles.
Okay, but can I just say something? Epistemic justification isn't necessary here because I'm just giving an account.
How do you know? Well, you're saying all this.
No, but Jake, I'm giving an account. I don't need to justify epistemic.
Oh, so you don't have to justify your account.
No, because
that's why you're a sophist. So if you can, you understand how silly this is? If you can do that, I can do that.
You said it's polytheism.
This is so silly. I can give an account. I don't have to justify it. You do have to justify it because we're arguing epistemology. Get out of here with all this sophistry. Get on my nerves. It's crazy. I don't have to justify my account. If you don't have to justify your account, I don't have to justify an account. You see how silly this is? Packy John. So you understand that they miss the whole point of the criterion problem, and they come back and say that, well, the solution to the criterion problem is I give an account, I tell a story that I don't have to give a justification for.
Yo, what's up, Jay?
Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you some questions, some problems that I have with Christianity that I'm looking into it. So, I wanted to ask you about like Christology, so the human nature and the divine nature. How do you even reconcile those? Like, for example, the divine nature is eternal, and then the human nature is created. So how do you reconcile Jesus being eternal and then also created at the same time?
Because of two natures. So he's a divine person who becomes incarnate. It's not a divine nature that becomes incarnate. It's a divine person with a divine nature who steps into time and space. How do we know that's possible? Because he'd already been doing it for all of the Old Testament, stepping into time and space. So we believe it not on the basis, first of all, of metaphysics, but on the basis of divine revelation, that it tells us that the second person, Yahweh's Son, has stepped into time and space many, many times because he's not bound by the logic and the principles of the created order. God created the created order. He created logic. Logic is a created thing in our view. It's not something that binds God. God is the ground of logic. He is not submitting to and the slave of logic. Logic is a created principle based on principles in the divine mind, and he transcends it. So there's nothing impossible or out of hand for God to choose not to actualize every one of his properties or powers and to step into time and space, just like the Muslims or the Jews believe that God was in time and space in various ways, in various capacities, unless they're the Muslims who reject this and think that God is only transcendent, which if he's only transcendent, then you have the problem of the previous caller, that how do we know what Allah's uncreated Koran is telling us? Because how could there be any similarity between the uncreated Quran and the created Qurans in time and space? So this problem, this bridge, this gap is never bridged in that position if you stress and only believe in transcendence. The Orthodox view, following Hebrew revelation, does not believe that God is only transcendent. He is also immanent, and there is analogical predication. Analogy means that you can predicate on the basis of similarity, not a one-to-one correspondence, similarity. But there's also dissimilarity. But we believe that God can condescend to speak to us, to make things clear to us. So we don't have a problem with anthropomorphic language, and we don't have a problem with theophanies. They think the two go together. But for the text that you're asking for, in Philippians 2, Paul says that Christ, who is and has the form of God, equal to God, Philippians 2, made himself of no reputation, taking on the form of a bondservant, meaning the form of humanity, coming in the likeness of men. He humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death on the cross. So he didn't surrender his divinity. It's a both and not an either or. So there's no contradiction between the divine nature and the human nature. God is not opposite the world. God created the world, and he created the world and mankind in his image, in his likeness. Even the Koran says Adam was made in the image and likeness of Allah. Well, wait a minute. I thought there's no likeness at all to Allah, you see. So both Judaism and Islam have this principle in their systems, and then they grapple with it in trying to make sense of this, when Christianity alone is consistent with the Hebrew revelation that the second person has always been manifesting and stepping into time and space. Why is it impossible for God? If God creates time and space, why is it impossible for him to manifest in time and space? Says who?
So even, let's say, like, the second person of the Godhead manifest, like, as Jesus. Like,
no, he is Jesus, not manifesting as Jesus. It is Jesus.
Yeah, sure, that's Jesus, right? So, like, when he's like walking around, does he have access to all knowledge? Is he still omniscient?
Absolutely. I mean, the text here says that he is equal with God. In John 1, when John says in John 1 that he was walking around with us in the flesh, John says he was also in the bosom of God as he was walking around, because he never surrendered or loses his divine nature.
Okay, so how come in the Gospel of Mark, he's hungry? I think it's chapter 11. He's hungry, and then he sees a fig tree, and he tries to go for fruit, but he sees that it doesn't have anything but leaves. And then how come he didn't know that it was not the season, and how come he didn't know the hour?
No, the whole point of that passage is an object lesson, because he curses the fig tree, because the fig tree is a symbol of Israel. It's not a lack of knowledge. He's making an object lesson for his disciples to say, you see this fig tree, how it has no fruit on it? The fig tree is a symbol of Israel. Israel no longer has fruit because it is barren, because they're about to kill their Messiah.
Yeah, I know, I get that. But the text itself, it says Jesus was hungry. So if
Jesus has a fully human nature, and he willed to have that, right? So in other words, as a divine person or subject, when he assumed human nature, he assumed it with all of its weaknesses and imperfections on purpose, to raise it, to deify it, and to heal it. That's the whole purpose. So he absolutely got tired. He absolutely got hungry. He absolutely got thirsty. He wept. All of those things are proper to humanity because he's fully human.
No, I get that. So, but the thing is that, he has the properties of human nature, but he's hungry, and he sees the fig tree, so he goes to find if it has any fruit, and then he sees it, right? But then it doesn't have any, and then he ends up cursing the fig tree and you said that it's like, it kind of represents Israel. But
he explains that it represents Israel.
Yes. He explains that it represents Israel. But my point was that if he's hungry, right, and he knows that the fig tree doesn't have any fruit, why doesn't he just go there and curse the fig tree? Why is he like going there for fruit?
Because in many places throughout the Gospels, the message and the intention is to show us his full humanity. Just like when he's in the garden and he prays to the Father, right? He says, let this cup pass from me, yet not my will, but thy will be done. In our understanding of that, he is intentionally subjecting his human will to the will of God the Father, because he wants to show us and to be an example to us that he really is fully human. And so he went through the whole range of human experience, from being born as a child to maturing into a full adult. So our exposition of a lot of these passages, that it is absolutely intentional to show us that he's fully human.
I see. So, like, I think it also in the gospel, maybe it's Matthew and Mark, where he doesn't know the hour. And I think it was John Chrysostom who says that. I think it's like a form of expression. So would you hold to that same interpretation of that passage?
Yes, if you read St. Basil's letter, I think it's 235 or 236, as I explained in the debate, Jesus oftentimes utilizes this form of exaggeration or rhetoric, where he expresses things in an extreme way. There is no one good but God, right? Does he literally mean no one is good? So he means he's not good, none of the prophets are good? No, it isn't. He's saying in an exaggerated way, there's no one good but God. So likewise, no one knows this but the Father, right? And that's Basil has many other examples if you read his letter. It's either 235 or 236, but there's an article on this if you want it. Let me find it. Now, some people, some of the church fathers exposited it as a text pertaining to the human nature. It can be interpreted either way, but ultimately, it doesn't. We're not worried about it because there are countless passages that talk about the Son also possessing omniscience. Right? Jesus knew all things. He knew what was in Nathaniel, John 2. So we don't have a problem saying that. Yeah, you could interpret this as a limitation that was proper to the humanity. For example, in Luke, when it says Jesus went to argue with the scribes and the Pharisees in the temple when he was a young man, it says that he grew in wisdom and stature amongst God and in favor amongst God and men. So those are properties that could only apply to humanity, right? The Son does not grow in stature. Jesus, I'm saying the divine subject of the Son does not increase or diminish his divine nature. Divine nature doesn't come in partition. It's not half. It's not percentages. Jesus isn't 50% divine, 50% human. He's 100% divine, 100% human. And so the passage in Luke where it says that he grew in wisdom and stature and favor is applicable to his human nature. And many passages in the scriptures are this way, where sometimes, for example, if he's doing a miracle, we said the miracles are evidences of and demonstrations of his divinity, his divine power, divine nature. Only God could change water to wine. Only God could walk on water. But other passages demonstrate that he's fully human, crying, eating, and they're intentional. It's not that his divinity lacked, but as again, Philippians said, he willingly chose to be in those states. It's the same thing with the question of God answering prayers and reciprocity. How does God answer prayers? If he's all-knowing, what's the point of praying? Well, as Dr. Bradshaw argues very lucidly, God willingly condescends to have reciprocity with his creatures. So yes, he's all-knowing. He knows what you're going to pray. Well, then why does he? Because he wants us to have a reciprocal prayer. That's why. Kryptos. Yeah.
So I'm a Christian, but I'm in the classical situation where I cannot, conclude with what dogma I would like to follow, So how do I approach this?
Well, what do you mean? What church? What do you mean?
Yeah, like denomination.
Well, what's your background?
Well, I'm Greek, so it's only Orthodox churches and handful.
Well, you got it easy. So what do you mean?
Well, okay, I know you're Orthodox, but you're Orthodox, right? Because
yeah.
I'm not sure.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Yeah, it's because I don't have a family background, so it's not really like many people have blind faith, even if it's true or not. But when I go to the church, I like the liturgy and stuff, but a lot of the times, with many traditions, it's very weird to me, because of the traditions not being in the Bible, and how like the stuff Protestants say, like that's going on through my mind, and I have to look at every single thing.
Okay.
Like I cannot.
Okay. Well, look, there's a. If you want to, the simplest thing I could think of is there's a 3-volume set by Dr. Clark Carlton, The Way, the Truth, and the Life, and it's 3 volumes, 2 of which are one's against Protestantism, one's against Catholicism, and one is for Orthodoxy. So maybe check that out would be a good place to start. That's the easiest kind of like 3-volume thing I could think of that would deal with that. So people asking, I did not say God is irrational or illogical. I said he's supra-logical. That's what I said. So there's a difference between saying something is transcends logic and logical categories and saying that it contradicts logic and logical categories. 2 different things. Boom. Again, I mean, Muslims have the exact same issue when it comes to the relationship of Allah's attributes to the essence. And they've been debating it for centuries. Again, we've covered this countless times. When they act like it's not a debate, they're lying. It absolutely is a debate. I mean, you can go watch Dr. Khalil and Jake debating this issue. So what do you mean it doesn't exist? And then they'll say, Shia don't count. Shia don't count. Says who? Why don't Shia count? What do you mean? And by the way, it's not just Shia. The other creeds. Remember when this guy acted like he didn't know what Aqidah meant? So you understand we have totally different approaches to this kind of stuff, right? I mean, for Christians, we aren't really supposed to be deceptive, right? Now, I'm not saying that there aren't deceptive Christians. Of course there are. But I think it's much more acceptable from their perspective, at least in my experience, that, yeah, you can lie to Christians. Because I asked him explicitly what his Aqidah was, and he wouldn't say, which is being intentionally deceptive. Yeah, Sunnis debated as well, exactly. The relationship of Allah to his essence is, I've got multiple books from various creeds of Islam debating it. And they act like it's not a debate. Now, when I brought this up on Twitter, I said, what do you mean it's not a debate? I kid you not. The answer was from many, many Muslims, well, we all think Allah is one. Okay, so because you use the word one, right? Well, we all say Allah is one. See, we don't disagree. Yeah, I know you use the word. The question is, what's the meaning? And you guys have gone to war over this. So what are you talking about? Okay, QD, if he destroyed me, I want you to come on and I want you to give some examples of where he answered my objections and destroyed me. For example, make sense of Muslim Lanter's argument about Allah's attributes and the dependence relationship and his shirt analogy. And how are there analogies when Allah is nothing like creatures? I mean, how slow are you guys to not understand this objection? And in the comments in the last few days, I realized they don't know what the word analogy means. They're literally saying, he was making an analogy. Yeah, exactly. Do you know what the word analogy means? Likeness or similarity. So QD, where you at, buddy? Come on and debate. If you're not going to come on and debate, then just boot these people. It's not a place for people to just spam gibberish. And in the comments of the Muslims who do think that Muslim Lantern won, I've asked every one of them that I see, maybe I haven't, there's tons of comments, I haven't got to all of them, but I asked them, please give some examples of where and how he answered the argument and refuted me. And they don't have any way to explain it. They're just spamming stuff. Because they know and they sense that maybe this is a weak position. Boom, what's up?
Hello, Dyer. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I just have a question regarding your Bible. Do you hold to the position that your Bible is infallible?
Yeah, but I don't know what you think that means.
I mean that it cannot contain error.
Well, again, I don't know what you think that means because that can mean different things. We believe there are scribal errors. Sure.
Okay. Are there contradictions?
No.
Okay. Can you flip to Matthew 16:4?
All right. What's your position
On the Bible? I'm not a Christian.
What are you?
I'm a Muslim.
Okay. And are you going to answer the Muslim dilemma first?
I mean, I'm just here to ask a question.
No, you're not. You're here to debate.
Yeah, I'm here to debate you on the Bible right now, yeah.
Okay, well, but first we're going to talk about the Islamic dilemma. Can you do that first?
What Islamic dilemma?
Because you're going to argue the Bible's corrupt and has contradictions. So why does the Quran tell me many places to go to a book that's corrupt?
Okay, so is this how like you deal with the contradiction?
No, I'm going to say let me grant you that there's contradictions. Okay, there's contradictions in the Bible. So why would Allah direct me to go to a book that's full of contradictions?
Yeah, so you're granting me that there's contradictions, correct?
For the sake of the argument, you don't know what that means?
Okay, so I mean, if an atheist came to you, how would you deal with the contradiction? Would you say
I'm going to argue tag? I'm not going to argue Bible text with an atheist.
Okay, why can't you just defend the text without like simply like running to my book? I don't understand why Christians do that.
Well, you want me to believe in the Quran, right?
Not necessarily.
Oh, you don't want me to believe in the Quran. Why are you debating if you don't want to believe in the Quran?
In the sense that I want you to become a Muslim? Is that what you mean? Or an argument?
Of course that's what I mean. Why would Allah direct me to... So I'm going to grant you for the sake of argument that, okay, the Bible's full of contradictions. Why would Allah direct me to a book full of contradictions?
No, but I mean, you're granting it for the sake of the argument. That's not
correct.
That's not your position, right? I want to alter your position academically.
Okay, so alter it by explaining to me why I should believe in a book that tells me to look to a book full of contradictions.
Okay, we're not discussing...
Okay, so you won't answer that, right? So no Muslim can answer this, right?
I can definitely answer.
Okay, what's the answer?
Okay, I can definitely answer your question.
What's the answer?
Of course I can.
What's the answer?
Okay, I'll let you do it. Go ahead. Show me where.
Show you where what?
Show me where it tells me to go back to a book with contradictions and to follow that book.
Does Allah in many places, you want me to pull up the different lists of the texts?
Go ahead, please.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
546, 2285, 6115, and 1827, for example.
Sir, you're shotgunning. Can we do one at a time?
You don't know these passages? They're well known. They come up in every debate between Christians and Muslims.
I agree, but we got to do one by one. This is called gish galloping. Can we do one by one?
It's not gish galloping. Just, you know these answers. You know these topics. You know this situation. It's come up for years. So
the passages are not...
I don't want to walk through every single passage. It'll take 20 minutes to do it. Just tell me what the answer is.
Okay, which one do you want to go with first?
It doesn't matter. Go with any of them because they tell me to go to the prior revelation. Do they not?
I mean, I disagree, but I'm gonna.
Okay, what do they tell me to go to if they don't tell me to go to that?
Okay, perfect. I'm gonna read you the verses. You said chapter 5, verse 46, correct?
Uh-huh.
Perfect. Okay. Now, can you hear me still? By the way.
Yep.
Okay. I'm curious if you've read like the verses that came after. I mean, have you read 2 verses that came after?
Yeah, I have it pulled up right here.
Okay.
None of those verses refute the point that's being made. In fact, they back it up.
Okay, let's see about that. So the verse you brought to prove that the Quran confirms the Bible, it goes as, then in the footsteps of the prophets, we sent Jesus, son of Mary, confirming the Torah revealed before.
What Torah is that?
The Torah that was revealed to Moses.
Thank you. And what Torah is that in the 7th century?
It's not going to be identical.
How do you know that?
Because we have explicit hadith that says that the
no,
Torah...
I want to know how you know that. Your hadith assert that. How do you know that?
I mean, there's many contradictions in the Old Testament.
Oh, so wait a minute. So now we're being told to go to a book with contradictions, like I said to begin with.
Where is it telling me to go to this book? Where? I don't really see that. It's just confirming the book that was revealed.
Again, other passages, 285, 6115, 1827,
Okay,
will say that you can confirm. Will say that you can confirm this revelation by what came before. But are you telling me that before we do that? Are you telling me that Allah's words can be corrupted?
Yeah. When you say corrupted, what do you mean? So,
no, wait a minute.
The Quran says that God's words. One second. The Quran says that God's words cannot be corrupted. But
exactly.
You have to understand. 1 second. You have to understand what is meant by that.
Okay.
Right?
What does it mean?
So the Quran makes it very clear that God's words cannot be corrupted.
Right.
And what that means is that you cannot change God's decree. You cannot change what's in His Lawh al-Mahfuz, which is the tablet with Him.
Yeah, I know. So you're going to apply it to the uncreated, right?
1 second. No. Just give me. Can I finish, please? I'm giving you my reasoning, and you're cutting me off.
Because we've heard all these arguments a million times. They don't address the topic. That's why.
You can hear it another millionth. You can hear it a millionth, and your first time. It's okay.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, thank you. So, according to the verse you're bringing, right, the Quran cannot be corrupted, right? What this means is that you cannot change God's decree, and you cannot change what's in His preserved tablet. Rather, what is being corrupted, according to chapter 2, verse 79, it is people writing something new with their hands and saying that it's from God, seeking a fleeting
and
gain.
That text also presupposes that the Torah at this time is not corrupted. Do you understand that we have listen, we have Torah and gospel. You understand that predate that. Listen to me. Do you understand we have texts that predate the 7th century?
Sure, I don't disagree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
But again, this is
so. What text would they be? You understand? In other words, we know what text they could go to in the 7th century to check it.
Sorry, repeat that.
We nowadays know already what text the Jews and Christians at this time in the 7th century had to go and look at. We have those texts. You understand that?
I don't know how this relates to what we're talking about.
Because that's what they're going to look to. You're this slow?
What do you mean look to? Where's it
oh my gosh.
to look to?
It says you can confirm the new revelation on the basis of the old. And how could we do that if Allah's words could be? It does say that. In the other verses, it says that.
Can I please reply? It's just like a monologue. Okay, I appreciate that. So the Quran is the new revelation.
I know that.
Confirms. 1 second. Man, just relax. Please.
The Quran tells you to confirm it by the previous revelation. You just admitted that. You already admitted that Allah's previous words cannot be corrupted, and you said that is the tablet with Him. You haven't explained it. I let you talk. What was the explanation?
You're interrupting me.
Because you're not explaining it. You're just talking around and telling us stuff. Okay, what is it? What is the unwritten tablet?
Unwritten tablet. What are you talking about?
Whatever you said, the uncreated tablet with Allah.
It's the preserved tablet. That's what.
And where is that?
Right? That's where He's at. What do you mean?
So there's an uncreated eternal tablet with Allah.
Did I say it was eternal?
Is Allah's Quran eternal? His speech. No. So he doesn't have uncreated speech.
It is uncreated.
You just said no.
Is that a paradox? Did you know that things can be generated into existence and be uncreated?
Okay. This is retarded. Something can come into existence and be uncreated. This is the stupidity of this stuff. And they have a problem with the eternal generation. Right? What does 547 say? Let the people of the gospel judge by what Allah has revealed in it. Those who do not judge by what Allah has revealed are rebellious. We have revealed it to you, the book of truth, confirmation of the previous scriptures. The very verses right here that we've walked through a million times. We don't need you to make up new exegesis and to say stupid stuff like something can be created that's eternal into existence. Generated into existence that's eternal. So it's an uncreated creation is what you're saying. Kings. It does not say that you can check the previous with the new. It does not say that. It says it right there in 547. King, what's up?
Hey, what's going on, Jay? I just been listening to you for a little bit. Is this a debate about religion, or is it also about the Sneeko and Tate situation?
It's just religion.
All right, gotcha. Yeah, no. Okay. No, yeah, I'm out here in Israel right now, so
that's fine. We're going to move on. The topic is Islam in those things. And I put Sneeko in the title because I was on the Sneeko channel debating Muslim Lantern 2 nights ago. Father Moses, do you want to say something?
Assalamu alaikum, Jay. Quran we talk about today, but I noticed that you had not astrology as a topic. I want to ask you questions about astrology Quran that's not in the listing for you.
Well, there's an eternal, uncreated Quran that is with Allah, that's different from Allah, but it's also a creature that comes into existence.
What about created eternal astrology as revealed in Quran?
Well, I guess since astrology is based on fatalism, yeah, we could say that Islam is in many schools, Aqidas, creeds, fatalistic.
I just want to ask you a question about topics you don't have listed on here.
Thank you. Joseph, what's up? Appreciate that. Joseph, unmute. Think about this too, just from the vantage point of the 7th century hearer, right? So imagine I'm a 7th century Jew or Christian, and that guy's saying, no, the Quran is not telling you to go check this. Even though it says very clearly in these passages that I can go check it, right? No, it's not telling you that. It's telling you that there's a corrupt Bible, but there's a real, true Bible, even though we have the existing copies of the Torah and the Gospels from the 7th century and earlier. No, there's a secret one that's not corrupt. Well, the hearers couldn't go to a secret one. You see how silly this is. How could I go and check? And by the way, how many times do they argue that Muhammad is predicted in the Bible? How am I going to go to the Bible when you said it's corrupt? This is how stupid this is. Then they turn around and say, yeah, it proves the Quran in all the places where it agrees with the Quran. This is how stupid this is. So I can go to a corrupt book to prove the one that's not corrupt. You see that?
Hey, Jay, can I ask you a question? One of the things that's come up a few times recently on Twitter here has been the issue of the ever virginity of the Theotokos, which we obviously know was affirmed by the Church Fathers, was even affirmed by Calvin and Luther. Are there other... I know that there's some references in the Old Testament, right, of the gate that has been...
Yeah, Ezekiel 44 we see as a reference to the Virgin.
Okay. And are there other arguments, or do we mostly just rely on the historical record and the fact, like, look, this was literally accepted for 1,500 plus years and was never really even questioned?
Well, so Jerome has an essay, and I noticed in the Pomazansky book, actually I was reading this last night, Pomazansky has a whole section on it as well, addressing the Protestant objections to ever virginity. So if people have a proto-presbyter, Michael Pomazansky's book, Orthodox Dogmatics, it has a really good section on this that's brief. But the classic refutation is still St. Jerome's perpetual virginity of Mary. And he deals with the exegesis where they say, well, brothers of the Lord, then that she was, the word till is a big deal. And he says that, Jesus says, I will be with you until the end of the world. On the Protestant exegesis, then we would have to say, oh, well, so Jesus won't be with us after the end of the world. So the word till does not necessarily mean that after that it changes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's the argument that I continue to use, which is like the children sat quietly until the teacher arrived.
Yes, exactly.
And it's like, well, then they didn't. Or somebody said the man on the desert island ate no food until he died, and it's like he didn't eat a big meal on the last day of his life.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. Jerome does the exact same thing with a bunch of other examples there in this essay. I've got the essay pulled up here where he goes through many of these.
And I can just Google it. I'll find it.
It's called Against Helvidius, the Perpetual Virginity of Mary by Jerome.
Perfect. I'll look it up. Thank
you.
Yeah,
it's about a 10-page essay that St. Jerome wrote that's kind of like a perennial classic. But thank you for that. Joseph, did you want to say something? By the way, I didn't mean to boot you. If you want to keep talking, you're welcome to come back.
No, that's fine, Jay. Sorry if I was not at the mic when you initially...
That was okay. What's up, man?
I've been... I'm Catholic, and... I've been trying to interact with Catholic groups at parish again, and one of the things that I have run into again is how people seem to there seems to be no awareness of how easy it is to fall into spiritual delusion. Or self-delusion. Mm-hmm. It's like there's no... And Catholics are getting into... I don't know if this is because of Vatican II or whatever, but Bible studies and subjecting yourself to the text of... I've even heard people describe the documents of Vatican II this way, you have to meditate on them and let them speak to you. And sort of it's almost like you're asking a text to take over your mind.
That might be just because of the Protestantization of Vatican II. I mean, that's, we focus and talk a lot, about the texts and Nostra Aetate and Lumen Gentium relating to Muslims and Hindus and all that, but we can't overlook the Protestantized elements of Vatican II. For example, the Novus Ordo liturgy was quite literally concocted with a bunch of Protestants. So, you know what I mean? So it's the liturgy itself of Vatican II is written by a Lutheran, an Anglican, Bonini, who was a Mason, and a bunch of other, whoever's. Right. So there's this Protestantization that happened, and you can also see it in the official acceptance of charismaticism from the Vatican, post-Vatican II.
Right. Yeah.
And those two components together, that's a recipe for prelest for sure.
Yeah, and the only reason I know about prelest is listening to your show. I had never even heard the word before, and I'd heard of I guess discernment of spirits before.
Right.
That's something that's discussed a lot in Roman Catholic, I guess theologians or spiritual theology, but they don't get into like the real danger. Like if you this idea that you can open up the Bible and there's a thing, you've probably heard of Lectio Divina, and I suppose there might be a
law
of
praying is a law of believing, yeah.
Or no, Lectio Divina, where you sit with a passage of scripture and let it impact you a certain way, and then I think it was invented in monasteries or something, but after Vatican II, it became popular to do that in like groups.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that could be a recipe. I mean, I wouldn't say that there's anything inherently wrong with meditating on the passage of Scripture, but I think it could be a recipe for, something nefarious creeping in for sure. So I appreciate that. We're going to move on. But so there's a guy who wants to come debate who's non-denominational. He's going to destroy me. I look forward to it. So I welcome him. And the link is in the chat. So please tell him to come. He's more than welcome. Here's the link again. And if you want to support the stream via Super Chat, you can do so at the Super Chat link. I have to go to the little ladies' room. I have to tinkle really bad. So I'm going to go sit down on the toilet because that's the traditional masculine way, according to the hadiths, to go to the bathroom. I'm just joking. But I will still sit down in honor of Tristan. Tristan's here. Shout out to him. He's probably going to leave now because I'm giving him a shout out, but I will sit down on the toilet to pee in honor of him, and I will be right back with more of your challenges, questions, and debates. And I hope my non-denominational destroyer manifests, meaning in the sense of appearing, not manifesting demonic entities. You know what I mean? But while I go tinkle, I have a little bit of a message. And that is our show sponsor, which is chalk.com. Please listen to this. I will be right back.
Chad Mode is your ultimate natural pre-workout, designed to take your performance to the next level. Chad Mode is for natty beast alphas only. Whether you're hitting the gym, invading a favela, conquering a small village, gambling, burning the midnight oil, mogging on your coworkers, or getting banned from Facebook, Chad Mode gives you the competitive edge you need. It's as simple as mixing 1 or 2 scoops of our fine powder into water or juice, providing you with a delicious, energizing beverage featuring a burst of sweet, organic fruit flavor. Chad Mode will give you the extra edge you desperately crave. Chad Mode stands out from the crowd by excluding artificial flavors, preservatives, sweeteners, and dyes. We've even avoided so-called natural flavors, ensuring a clean and effective formula. Only soy boys and betas guzzle blue dye and sucralose, further tanking their already low testosterone levels. Chad Mode is made in America. Unlike your common TikTok peasant's pre-workout powder, it does not contain Chinese lab-made caffeine and artificial sweeteners that soy boys so often crave. Experience the pure goodness of Chad Mode with Blue Magic registered trademark organic blue spirulina extract, organic lemon, cherry, and organic maple crystals. Forget synthetic caffeine. Embrace the natural power of organic green coffee bean extract. Each dose of Chad Mode mirrors the caffeine kick of a cup and a half of coffee, delivering a surge of energy alongside essential vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and herbal extracts. Chad Mode will allow you to fire your boss and mog on anyone who opposes you. Chad Mode will give you a dominant and aggressive edge, like a lion hunting a gazelle, where the gazelle is a TikTok gym zoomer macro guzzler.
All right, we're back. So now, who is the non-denominational person that wants to debate? Do we know who he is? Let me check Discord because maybe there's something in here. Where's the non-denom guy? Non-denominator guy. Judah? Oh no. If his name is, quote, Judah, we know we got a serious Hebrew Israelite, Hebrew roots man. Here's the link. Where's he at? Yo. Okay, he says yo. Here you are. Come debate, dude. Yo, yo, yo. All right. So we're waiting on Judah to show up. Until he gets here, let's see. Midwest. No, wait. Here he is. Hold on, Midwest. So we're going to go to... we're going to get destroyed. Judah says he's going to destroy me in a debate. Good. I asked for someone to come destroy me. Please. You got to unmute, man. Yakub, what's up? Unmute. Unmute, man. Judah, you're on. Unmute. Yehuda, what's up? We're waiting for you to unmute. Madish Yahoo, what's up?
Hello?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Where's my destruction? I'm ready for it. Come destroy me.
Alright. So, one sec.
Yeah, you're eating? Yeah, it's funny.
Right.
It's really funny.
So, the only reason I think you're wrong is because you don't read the Bible.
Oh, is that right? We literally just lectured through the Bible for the last 2 hours. All right, this guy's a troll. Why is that funny?
No, bro. No, bro.
Boot him from Discord. Why are you wasting my time with this nonsense? I don't know why you guys... Somebody needs to get it back in the Discord and, like... ban these idiots. See, this is why we have the hard-handed... In the old days, we had the iron fist rule in Discord, and it needs to come back because these people just waste everybody's time. And it, you notice that people, they can't even talk, right? Like the people who come on like this with a bunch of damn food in their mouth, giggling, they can't even talk. Get the food out of your mouth. Get the hot pockets out of your mouth first. Okay, swallow your hot pocket and then make your argument.
Hello, Jay.
Yes, hello, Arian. They took the stone from here.
Are you drunk by any chance?
Yeah, I'm drunk, even though I don't drink and I hate alcohol. Totally drunk.
You kind of sound intoxicated, man.
That's because I was impersonating the previous idiot.
Oh. So, I heard you got, you just finished debating Sneeko and the Muslim Lantern.
Mm-hmm.
What's your afterthoughts on that?
I felt like the clip that I put up of the 7-minute section on the attributes was the worst part for him.
Do you feel like you got the better of the debate or not?
Yeah, and I think the 70+% audience reaction agrees as well.
Okay, yeah. Interesting, because the other side thinks you lost. What's your thought about that?
Well, as I said, I gave about 20 different options for Muslims to come explain where he actually made a good response or a good argument or good critique. And none of the people who I've asked that to have actually replied. So tell me where Muslim Lantern gave a good response or in what way his answer on the attributes was coherent.
I'll be honest, I just seen clips, but from what I've seen, that's why I'm just asking you your thoughts,
Again, I mean, I felt like it was a blowout. So have you seen the poll?
Come again?
Have you seen the poll?
Yeah, I've seen multiple polls. Some polls say you won, the other polls say you lost.
Oh, well, this was the poll they created, right? The poll they created, which they only wanted Sneeko's largely Muslim audience to vote in, ended up being Jay, 73%, Muslim Lantern, 26%.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, the thing is, from what I've seen so far, I feel like Christians side with you, and then the Muslim sides with him. So that's what I've been seeing.
Well, so that's why you have to actually watch the debate and see who made the better arguments, and go and figure out whether he answered on the attributes or not, because that part was pretty comedic. Landon. Landon.
Hey, Jay, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Hey, brother, how you doing? I got a couple things to say. I'll try to be brief, as brief as possible. But I play music for a living. I started out in church and all that stuff. Now I'm kind of find some fairly large, like, pop acts. But, like, that's a fun fact for everybody listening. Musicians, most of the musicians behind, like, pop stars and stuff like that, they came from church, predominantly black church, really. But man, like, a lot of my co-workers and stuff, I've just realized, especially since becoming like an inquirer into Orthodoxy and whatnot, these dudes, most of my like buddies who I play with, do not believe that Jesus is God. And
you're saying they're like evangelical praise and worship people? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, hell yeah. Well, I live in Georgia, so it's like
okay.
I'm outside of Atlanta. It's like Six Flags over Jesus is what they call it.
Right, but they're all like they're like evangelicals who don't even know that Jesus is divine. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's kind of terrifying, but I don't know. That all kind of goes into, like, I talked to a couple of the pastors that I thought were cool to seek counsel from, especially since inquiring into Orthodoxy over the past year. And a common thing that's been said to me is whenever I bring these questions up to these dudes, most of them will look at me like I have three heads, but the other ones will be like, I think there's a common desire for all of us to just want more, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And which I just think is a stupid response, because it's like, well, yeah, I don't feel like it's not about getting things, but I don't feel like I'm experiencing what this whole thing is. So of course I want. But have you ever heard people like say that argument or that response? That was really my question, I guess. Like, or if there's a response to it.
Yeah, I think it's very common for evangelicals, non-denominational people, to get sort of burnt out and to feel like they're not really getting anything out of that, and it has no essential connection with history. It's not rooted in anything. It's inauthentic. Yeah, I think I would say that's actually the experience probably of most megachurch non-denominational people, because, and this was some years ago, if you look at the studies, it was like Pew Research studies from some years ago, like megachurches have a really low retention rate. So they'll make these, quote, conversions. They'll have huge numbers of converts and church joiners or whatever. And then within 2 to 3 weeks, the majority of them leave. So I think that's very common. But I'm not surprised to hear that Protestant, evangelical, non-denominational megachurches are essentially abandoning basic Trinitarian theology and the deity of Christ. Robert Hunter. And Father Deacon, feel free to chime in anytime you want.
Thanks. Yeah, that's we just brought that up the other day. I was talking with some parishioners because I forget how the megachurch was coming up, and just think about it this way, like you said, Jay. Its primary focus is kind of consumerism and entertainment.
Yeah.
And that's only going to last, like anything in life, for a little bit.
Right.
People are entertained for a little bit, and then they find that they're not fulfilled, they're not changing, and they leave, which is probably why you're seeing a high retention rate too. Another critique of it is it's usually associated as
you mean a low retention rate?
Yeah, sorry,
yeah.
Excuse me. It's also associated with like kind of a cult personality.
Yeah, the superstar pastor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody had a good comment here. I forgot where it went. Something about megachurches. Oh, many of the non-denominational and megachurch stuff, as the commenter here has noted, are openly like warming up to the Skittles stuff.
Who was the first one that one of the major guys?
You talking about Rick Warren did, I think.
Rick Warren, yeah, that was in Orange County. He was like one of the first guys. And, by Protestant standards, he started off kind of run-of-the-mill, kind of
right,
lower Orthodox. And then he started bringing in some wacky stuff, too.
Well, yeah, around the time that he joins the Council on Foreign Relations and then it becomes pro-Obama, he does that stuff. Do you remember that? I'm pretty sure Rick Warren, right? So when he writes Purpose Driven Life, becomes this huge book-selling hit. Then he joins Council on Foreign Relations, or right after, or whatever, right before, and then I think he was like pro-Obama, which surprised everybody. And then
what was really weird, he brought in Muslim speakers.
Yes, and then he's like, by the way, now I'm pro Skittles marriage. So that's when he flipped on that.
Which is wild, because if you know anything about, I don't know exactly what it is today because things have changed, but Orange County, California was always kind of a Republican stronghold.
Right.
In a very blue state. You have Richard Nixon, and so I was kind of odd that bold that he took that move, but if his handlers said that's the way he's got to go.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, yeah, they basically said, you're going to do this now, Rick. And, that could have been because there's compromise or money. Could be either one. Remember that one who was that? Remember that guy that got busted with, he was George Bush's mentor, pastor, megachurch guy, and then he gets busted with meth and 304s. Remember that guy?
No, what was his name?
Somebody in the chat will remember him. Bush, spiritual advisor, mega church, metha church, mega church, meth, prostitute.
The Crystal Methodist Church.
Yeah, exactly. Ted Haggard, that's him.
Ted Haggard.
Ted Haggard. So remember Ted Haggard, this guy with he's got that weird, creepy evangelical smile. Let me pull him up here. Yeah, this guy. And by the way, it wasn't just meth; it was meth and young males.
Wow.
Yeah. Accidentally shut down my stream here. Hold on a second. Let me pull it back up. So pulling up Ted Haggard was too much. It was cancer for the stream. The whole stream collapsed here.
And then the other big one too is Greg Laurie and the Harvest Crusade.
Remind me of what's going on with that one.
So if any of you seen the Jesus Revolution with
yes,
Fraser.
Yeah.
And interesting enough about that film, it's supposed to be about Pastor Chuck Smith.
And that's Calvary Chapel, right?
That's Calvary Chapel.
Okay.
And so I guess you could argue maybe they really were the seeds, the kind of proto megachurch.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Yeah. So Greg Laurie was the kind of protege of Chuck Smith. I went to school with his son, and he started this Harvest Crusade, which is kind of a base name, a crusade. It's like totally on PC, but they would have it like the Angel Stadium, these huge like revival. They'd bring in like Crystal Lewis and I even remember Mel Gibson came to one, and it's just a big show. And then of course,
is that when he was promoting The Passion?
Oh yeah, you're probably right. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the mega churches were inviting Mel Gibson to come talk about the movie when it came out. Remember that?
And then there's this big altar call, and people go up. So I think that's probably the beginnings of the megachurch, because that was Harvest Crusade was prior to Rick Warren's Saddleback Church and stuff like that.
Okay. All right, let's see who's next. Now, guys, remember, it's not Orthodox FAQ day. You can always reach out to your catechesis, people doing catechesis for those kinds of questions. We're looking for people who disagree. Topics are Protestantism, Catholicism, Islam, and then I listed some others: Bible, church history, patristics, councils, Koran, Revelation, evangelicalism, Arianism, cults, Hebrew roots, Black Hebrew Israelites. All of those are on the table. So we're not doing atheism today. We're not doing Orthodox catechesis today. Theophilus, what's up? You gotta unmute.
Do you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I just have a short question. I'm Orthodox, but I lately have been struggling in my faith because of, you know how there's like the Latinizers, Ortho-Latinizers, like, you know, Jonathan Hill and Alan Brown and those guys. I wonder if you can comment on the Confessions of Dositheus and what it seems to imply about infant damnation. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think it teaches infant damnation. I think it teaches the deprivation of grace, and the deprivation of grace does not entail damnation. And this is why most of the Eastern Church Fathers are pretty consistent in saying that the infant is not guilty of any actual sin. Well, if actual sin is what places you under judgment, what actual sin have infants committed? There is a deprivation of grace, but a deprivation of grace does not entail damnation. So when the texts say, and I would say read Pomazanski's book, because Father Pomazanski in his Orthodox Dogmatics has a whole section on why we don't believe in the Augustinian doctrine of original sin. And again, remember, the Augustinian doctrine of original sin is premised on the idea, as we covered about an hour ago in here, the notion that all men are in Adam as in an archetype, right? So the doctrine is mas damnata. And the Carthage canon does not say mas damnata. It says that for the remission of original sin. That doesn't mean they have guilt. You can speak of the effects of sin as if it's the sin, okay? So an infant having the effects of Adam's sin can be called original, quote, sin. But that does not entail inherited guilt. And nobody teaches inherited guilt except for Calvinists. Even Roman Catholics have discarded the doctrine of inherited guilt. So the only way that we would ever come to this position is if we, and keep in mind the Confession of Dositheus and those documents around that time, the other confessions, if you read the Norman Russell book on the translation of the Palamite Synods, in the first chapter, I think it's the introduction, it says that Dositheus reprinted and republished the Palamite Synods to show that they're reaffirming the Palamite doctrine. Palamos does not believe that infants are guilty of actual sin. Okay, so in other words, it's not teaching Latin doctrines of inherited guilt. The promulgation of the Palamite doctrines by Dositheus himself proves that he had no intention of Latinizing. These people are all really making an argument on the basis of terminology and words. Even in the Pomazanski book, he says it's not a problem to use the word transubstantiation. And Dositheus also uses that term. It just matters what you mean. So all of these people hinge their arguments on word concept fallacies that this or that Latin term necessarily entails and implies all of the Roman Catholic baggage or the Augustinian baggage. But again, you're not going to be able to find solace in Rome because Rome doesn't teach this doctrine. So this is silly ignorance from these people if they want to try to go to Rome. Well, guess what? Rome has even said that limbo of infants, which was introduced to soften the Augustinian doctrine, that's not even something you have to believe in anymore in the Roman Catholic world. So this will tell you what I'm talking about here.
And I want to point out to you, this is just part of a problem typically in the West. We talked about this abstractionism, and you have to understand that Orthodoxy is a life. it's our theology is not an abstract propositional thing that can be divorced from the life all the way down to the parish level. And I find it really interesting that when you're in the parish, when you're going through catechesis, none of your priests, and there might be an outlier, some weird guy out there, but doesn't that say something that none of the priests are teaching this? Just the opposite.
No, it's people who have no blessing to teach this stuff, and they're just running around the internet, stirring up people and confusing them. And by the way, there's at least in the Discord, we have at least 2 references to the liturgical documents which demonstrate that infants are not de facto damned. So even the liturgy tells us this. I can see if it's I know it's it's pinned in the mod chat, but let me see if I can find it.
Pull it up real quick.
I can scroll back to it here, I think.
But you have to keep in mind that there's all kinds of demonic temptations. And the one temptation is you're smart enough to figure this out by the text alone, apart from a life in the church, apart from the kateholos and the parish life and all these various things. And you'll be the one that figures out the true theology, and everybody, including all your priests, are all heretics. I mean, doesn't that sound demonic? And that's what these people, these Latinized, are doing. They're out on their own, going through cherry-picking texts, contra to the life and the consensus of the priests and the parish and the entire life of the Orthodoxy, and they're going to correct everybody. So everybody should see that's clearly demonic. It's clearly a demonic temptation, and these people have fallen for it. And again, as Jade pointed out, no episcopal blessing to teach whatsoever. So it's crazy that people will even listen to these people who are not even credentialed. I mean, it'd be one thing if, like, hey, look, they're credentialed, they have, a theology or philosophy degree, but they don't have a blessing. That would still be wrong, but these people don't even have any formal training or credentials, and they're out there, and everybody online not everybody, a large portion or substantial seem to get swept away and deceived by these people.
So the Lenten Triodion and the Saturday before Meat Fair Sunday reads, "We should know that when baptized infants die, they enjoy the paradise of delight, whereas those that were not illumined by baptism, those born of pagans, neither go to paradise nor Gehenna." And that is the Lenten Triodion readings. And then there is the Lord's judgment on unbaptized infants and their parents from the life of St. Basil the Younger. And it reads, "The Lord looked upon them, the unbaptized infants, and was enraged on account of blindness, not against them, but against the parents." Then it goes on to say, "The Lord commanded a place of rest be created for them, and a very small enjoyment of eternal life," but not theosis is the key. So the speculation in the liturgy and in some of the church fathers on this issue is that they are not partaking of theosis in the eschaton, but they are also not condemned, and so there is potentially a place of natural felicity or beatitude. And I know that somebody's going to say, well, that violates the statement in the canon that there's a third place. There's no third places. It's not a third place. It's a place of resurrection that is not theosis. So it's the same place, quote unquote, but it is not a partaking of theosis, which is only applied to those who are baptized in Christ and who live the life and so forth. So it's not an either or thing. And the other thing these people do is they read these canons in a mechanical wooden way and try to force it into a Latin Augustinian framework. And all you need to know is that when you go to Bishop Irenae, when you go to Orthodox theologians, whether it's Pomazansky, whether it's Meyendorff, whether it's any of the priests that are out there, Father Michael Lill, whether it's anybody else, the clergy, they're all telling you that it's not the Augustinian view. So why are you going to listen to random goobers on Twitter about what the Orthodox? It's just silly. Like, it's not a Protestant thing where you go to random dudes, right? What would you say to that, Father Deacon? Like, who should we be listening here? Anonymous Twitter profiles?
Yeah, that's exactly why the prescription is live a life in the parish. Now, it doesn't mean that the priest is infallible, but that's the prescribed way. You learn from the priest, and again, you don't learn. You're warned against learning from people who don't have a blessing to teach. And like you said, there's this consensus. So if you remember, and I won't name the name, but there was somebody who was struggling with the same thing, Augustinian original sin. And I said, well, they came to visit the parish, and I said, did you talk to priest? Your priest. And he says, well, no, because he's wrong. I said, well, did you talk to Father Russell, our priest? No, because he's wrong. I'm like, okay, so all the priests are wrong, and you're right because you were listening to this guy online. I mean,
yeah, and these are people, by the way, who are usually like new, right? Not everybody, but in the case of the guy you're talking about, and in many other cases, it's like, oh, I was a Roman Catholic last year. I just converted this year. Oh, now I have this issue.
Yeah.
Or I was a Protestant Calvinist, and now I'm looking into Orthodoxy. Oh, here's an issue. It takes time to understand and study through these issues. They're not solved you're not going to solve a lot of these issues in a year, 2 years, 5 years. Okay? It takes a long time to know and understand the complexities and the nuances of these issues. And let me give you another example of this. If you go to the Roman Catholic website, right, Vatican.va, and you look up the infant limbo document that I'm talking about, right here, approved by Ratzinger, hope for the salvation of infants and those who die without being baptized. You will notice that the document itself from the Catholics, which is the stupidity of all this, is that these people are actually saying that we ought to look to the Roman Catholic position, not realizing that the Roman Catholic position has evolved past the Augustinian position. This whole document is about how they don't accept the Augustinian position anymore, and that you can hope for the salvation of unbaptized infants. Now, the document goes through the history of the question and makes all the points that I made, that the Greek fathers typically did not think that unbaptized infants were necessarily damned or had any inherited guilt. It then goes on to talk about how Augustine is the first to really stress inherited guilt, the very thing that we always argue. So the irony is that all of the locus of these people's focus, we ought to be listening to the Roman Catholics and the Latin Church Fathers, the very Vatican people that they're looking to about this stuff, make our point in this document.
And what's interesting, like you said, it's not even a Roman Catholic mindset.
That's what I'm saying.
It's a Protestant mindset. Like, well, I'm brand new, but you know what theology is? It's just an intellectual pursuit, and so I can just read through these texts, and I'll show everybody else they're wrong. But Orthodoxy doesn't work that way. Theology is not divorced from the ethos and the life and the virtues and a hierarchy, right? I mean, it's ultimately satanic. It's anti-hierarchy.
Stephen, what's up? You gotta unmute, man. Unmute, man. Steven, unmute. EV, $36.74. Orthodox appeal to old tradition as well as support the truthfulness of the Christian claims. Expound on this, because I've seen some people ask how you know what the old tradition is or that it was kept. Well, we know that it's kept, at least as possible, because the scriptures were not written down from the time of, as far as we know, Adam to Moses. So how was that revelation transmitted? Well, as far as we know, it was transmitted orally. And then it's written down at the time of Moses, we believe, by faith, according to divine revelation. So God can preserve something in a written or an oral form. There's nothing that prevents God from preserving it. And then, of course, we would say that there's many places, even within Scripture, that identify things that are oral or extra canonical or extra biblical as tradition. So something that's an oral tradition, by the way, also can be written down. So, for example, the liturgies are the best example of this. The apostles didn't write in the New Testament what the liturgical worship is supposed to be. They complain about abuses, they warn about this or that, but there's no liturgical service in the New Testament. Well, God seems to care in Leviticus how people worship him. So how do we know how to worship him? Well, I think providentially that the liturgies were not in Scripture so that we would have to go to the church. And that's in fact what happens, is that the apostles in the various sees of the Roman Empire create and draw up liturgies based on Jewish temple and synagogue liturgies for the churches. So by default, you have to look to tradition for something like the liturgy, and that's one of the easiest, best examples of an oral, quote-unquote, tradition that eventually becomes written down, or an extra-biblical tradition. Other ideas, too, would be how we know what books are in the canon. For example, how do we know that Matthew, the disciple, wrote the Gospel Matthew? Well, it's part of the church's tradition that he did. So tradition plays a role in apostolic authorship, which plays a role in canonicity. Daniel J., $10. You should do the review on a debate with Pints with Aquinas. There was a Mormon named Jacob Hansen who debated Trent Horn on the Book of Mormon. I'd love to see you debate him on Trinity versus tritheism. Yeah, I'm open to that. We haven't had any Mormons really in the debate space that I'm aware of. I mean, I'm sure there is somewhere a Mormon apologist or something, but yeah, that would be interesting. I'm not opposed to that. Reckley, $10. What's the difference between the Greeks and the Russians? Language, liturgical expression, different cultures. Noah M, $5. If performing a correct baptism is enough for a valid baptism, I never said that. Again, there's no rigid formula for this. In a case-by-case basis, and everybody who's a Spurg or everyone who's a, nerd, I'm not calling you a nerd, I'm saying that everyone who has this Roman Catholic mindset, they think there has to be a one-size-fits-all answer for this across the board. And one of the positives of Orthodox views of canon law is that we always strive to not have the legalistic spirit of the Roman Catholic Western mindset, where we think there has to be a one-size-fits-all answer for every reception into the church. So I don't have any problem saying that people can be received back into the church purely through confession, or that the church can determine that if the Roman Catholic did it this way, they can be received through chrismation, they can be received through vesting or whatever. It doesn't bother me, because I'm not trapped in some sort of legalism where I think that the church has to abide by canons as if the laws are made for men, not men for the laws. So it's the exact same spirit as the Pharisees.
Yeah, Bishop Maxim and I was with dinner with him, His Grace, a couple of weeks ago, and we were bringing this up, this exact scenario. And I was talking in class about it, that think about it in terms of secular law. There's like the rules and laws, the canons on the books, right? Like this penalty, or every judge has the ability to look at all the details. That's like the framework, right? From which they then move to consider all the details, and they can adjust that. They can suspend the penalty. They could, it's not breaking the canons to do that. And so Bishop Max and I were talking about this, and we were talking about what St. Basil did when he decided that, yes, we have this canon rule, but in this scenario, it would be bad to apply that and lose these heretics, the Eutychians, and you remember the other ones too. Mm-hmm. And so in that specific scenario, Basil, in order to win them over, decided to receive them through chrismation, not baptism. That's a perfect example. That doesn't mean you throw out the rule. It just means that's the rule and kind of guideline what you operate by, and you can adjust that given different circumstances, because we're not pharisaical legalists, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, just look, the absurdity of the Roman Catholic position is evident in the fact that atheists, Muslims, and Satanists can baptize you. So they divorce the notion of being catechized and given the faith from the baptism. Obviously, we're speaking of adults here. That's the Roman Catholic position. So all these people who want all this Latin stuff, this Latinizing temptation, they don't understand that. Do you understand where that position actually leads to and what the actual Roman Catholic position is? And most of these people can never even tell you what the three necessary elements are to a Roman Catholic sacrament: matter, form, and intention. They can't tell you what that means. They don't. They're just being duped by other ignorant people on the internet on the basis of so-called translations. But you know, people can be malicious in their translations. Miloslav, $5. What about Apophaticism and Saint Isaac, the Syrians' view after Origen? So as I just checked, he died before 681. The Third Ecumenical Council in 681 is what gives the definitive condemnation of the Origenist view of the Origenist worldview. Okay, so there's an Orthodox version of Apophaticism, which just means restoration. I've not read enough of Isaac of Syria to know if he teaches specifically universal salvation, like Origen does. And that is condemned in the Fifth Council, and that's condemned explicitly. But the entire Origenist system is condemned in the Sixth Council, which is after 1 year after Saint Isaac the Syrian's death. So if he held to the Origenist position, we would just simply say he's wrong. And by the way, I noticed Father Michael Pomazanski also mentions a couple other errors beyond just Apophaticism that Gregor of Nyssa held. Gregor of Nyssa held to the erroneous view of the ransom theory being offered to the devil. And that view is later rejected by many church fathers. So, yeah, we don't have a problem saying that church fathers can make errors. Many of them make errors. It's a silly thing when Orthodox people try to have this position that the church fathers never made theological errors. But, I mean, they mean well when they make this argument, but it's just simply not true. And Pomazanski lists many other mistakes. So we have a super chat here. Let me see. Where'd it go? In Alan Siegel's book, Two Powers in Heaven, there's a debate between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ismail. Yes, I read this part about the way that heretics interpret the multiple powers in heaven, etc., and earth. This distinction is used for the Sophia doctrine in regard to Gnostics. Rabbis asserted the distinction. Do you think there's an intermediary of Essenes and the Essenes distinction in the Second Temple period? If you read David Bradshaw's book, Aristotle East and West, he works through the usage of the Essenes distinction by Philo and then by people in the 1st and 2nd century. I don't think he mentions any rabbinical sources. He may. I don't remember. I can go look. But that's a good question. I'm not well studied enough on 1st and 2nd century rabbinic Judaism to actually know. Elias Micaias, $1. What's the 30-second refutation of Neoplatonic model of God in which the one degrades into emanations? I have critiques of Neoplatonism on my channel. You can find those old videos. Matthew, $25. Thank you for being mean to strangers on the internet. Well, I seem to excel, I guess, at that. Alula, $5. What? It's a good thing that you recorded the debate with ML because Sneeko's team muted you and then unmuted you. Well, to be fair, though, on my side of it, you can hear that Sneeko gets a phone call. So I don't think that he was actually trying to mute me in the open statement. It muted because he got a phone call. And I did hear the phone ring, so I don't think he's not lying about that. SLID 8B, where is the Holy Spirit in the Old Testament? I just did a whole talk on all of the theophany references in the Torah. It took about 3 hours, and many of those reference the Holy Spirit. So, I mean, you could just go to just use a search, do a Bible search of references to Spirit in the Old Testament, and you'll see all those references. There's many. I mean, Moses lays hands on the elders, and the Holy Spirit's there. Numbers 11. The Holy Spirit above the waters in Genesis, right? I mean, the Holy Spirit's all throughout the Old Testament. Probably maybe a dozen-ish places, maybe more. I mean, we could look that up. Let's see. Let's see. There's a... Just go watch my talk on this, because we cover these. Now, we don't cover everything, because I haven't gotten to the... I've only done the Torah references. But the Torah, the Spirit's mentioned in the Torah in many places. Roll Stakes $5. What is worse? Muslims calling in and saying the dumbest things like the uncreated can be generated into time, into existence, or the brothers that say that Jews are not Jews. I think that Jewish is not a Jew because I think that's stupider than what is being argued otherwise. Lerothios Soliakos, $11.11. Greetings, Jay. God bless you for your work. For the Greek person that called in earlier, I would be willing to discuss this matter from Greek to Greek. Send a message to me on Facebook. His name is Ierotheos, Erothios Soliakos. It's a super Greek name. $5.99. What do you think about Putin and kissing the Koran? Well, I mean, have you heard me making a huge deal about, Putin's super Orthodox? I haven't made that, so it's unfortunate. I'm not surprised. I think that's sort of the spirit of our age is thinking that all the religions are kind of the same. But no, I'm not surprised by that. It's unfortunate. Robbie Heck Music, $5. Why don't you consider Catholics Protestants? Actually, St. Justin Popovich argues that they are the first Protestants. So that if you read his book Life in Christ, that's the whole argument of that European paganism and papism chapters in that book make that very point. Logan, $5. Keep kicking butt. Thank you so much. Rootner, $10. What do you think about the Shroud of Turin? Is there anything that you take away from it? I never really have looked at this as a proof per se. I don't have any hard opinions on it. I'm fine with it being legit, or if it's not, it really doesn't affect my theology or my faith at all. But it's interesting. But you know what? I mean, I've seen people. So going back to when I was a Protestant, I saw Protestants trying to prove with this, and then I would see even other Protestants debunking it. And so I've seen this back and forth for 25 years. So I don't really find it that interesting, honestly. But I don't have a problem with it. We went to it on our pilgrimage. Although you don't actually get to see it when you go there. It's behind all these glass cases, and you see a picture of what it looks like. So I don't know. I thought that was kind of lame, but
it's like national treasure.
Yeah, they say Father Vladimir said they display it like once a year, and that's because supposedly it degrades when it's exposed to oxygen or something. So I found the experience to be underwhelming, honestly, but I was also sick with like 105-degree fever. That probably played into it. Patty Dog, what's up? No, maybe not 105. I probably had 102 fever. If 105, I'd be in the bed. But I had a fever. But what's up, man?
Hey, Jay.
Mm-hmm. What's up?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, what's up? Think you got a bad connection, bro. So again, today it's for objections. I know people want to call in with FAQs, but we try to keep it to people who disagree and object. What's up, Mel? I'm gonna have to go pretty soon, so let's get these last few in. Yeah, I think the highest I've ever had is 104 when I had pneumonia, and I did have to go to the hospital when I had a 104. So no, it was probably more like 100, 101. I mean, I was pretty bad, but. What's up, man? Mel, I'm mute.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to point something out about the Muslim dilemma. I think that they don't realize that when they say, oh, we believe parts of the Bible that confirm the Quran, I could just easily turn that around and say the same and say, well, yeah, I confirm the parts of the Quran that are in line with the Bible. And now we're just at an impasse, and that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, that's a good point. You could argue it that way. I mean, and again, these passages are not ambiguous. We revealed the Torah. We revealed the guidance. Go to the Torah. We are ordained all this in the Torah. Again, 5, 44, 45, 46, 47. Let these people judge. We have revealed it. Look at the previous revelation. It's all in these passages. And so either way they go on the dilemma, like you're saying, it's a problem, but we could just flip it around on them and say, okay, so why can't I pick and choose out of your book what confirms what came before? And then they'll say,
exactly,
because the Quran is true. Yeah, but that's what's in question.
Yeah.
Yeah, great points. Thank you, Mel. This is actually a good point because people misunderstand. Muslims don't know how to debate. Like 99.9% of them, they don't know what to do in debate. Like, do you notice when Muslim Lantern did his opening statement and he asked me a question in his opening statement? That's like, you don't do that in debate. Asking me questions like what you're okay now. But then when I start talking and responding, let look at him talking. He will talk. He'll look at him talking. Interrupt. Okay. So, but. I mean, have you ever done a debate before? You don't start asking Q&A questions and interrogation in your opening statement, right? So it's totally out of accord. Why do they come to you for judgment when they already have the Torah? We revealed the Torah. And then they have to come up with this ad hoc nonsense of, oh, there's a secret Torah. It's not the Torah that already existed amongst the Jews and the Christians. You see how stupid that is? Obviously, the hearers who are Jewish and Christian can't go to a secret Torah. It has to be the one that was revealed to them in their hands. Duh. This is so silly. This is so fundamental. And it's such a devastating point that they lose their mind and come up with all this nonsense. Oh, well, actually, it's all corrupted. So I'm supposed to go to a corrupted book? Oh, and then when we see the problem with that, they say, no, there's a secret Torah. How are the Christians going to go to a secret Torah? And by the way, what is the evidence of a secret Torah? You're just asserting all these things. And by the way, we have Torah and Gospels from the 7th century and earlier. And they're the ones that we have. It's not that difficult. It's a very simple point. Seth.
Hello, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Hi, Jay. Hi, Father Ananias. I really appreciate both you guys what you do. I guess my question is, I'm coming from a Lutheran perspective, but I generally, from what I've seen in Orthodoxy, I was raised Baptist, and I've just been kind of trying to read the Church Fathers more. I guess my question is, I don't know how to reconcile certain things. Like, I'm willing to concede 99% of the theological points, like the essence energy distinctions. I think it makes the filioque make no sense, and I think that is, I genuinely do. I agree with that more so, but my contention is with something like the Seventh Ecumenical Council binding the consciences of people to doing something that could be idolatry. And I'm not saying that is what it is, because I understand there are times.
Okay, but anything could be idolatry, right? So reading the Bible could be idolatry. Totally. So the fact that something could be abused has nothing to do with whether it's a legitimate principle that is binding. So if you read John Damascus's little book, Defense of the Holy Images, and the book by St. Theodore the Studite on the Holy Icons. Both of those are very short, small books. John Damascus's book focuses on the philosophical side of iconography, and St. Theodore the Studite's book focuses on the Christological dimension of it. Those two books, I think, solidify philosophically and dogmatically why we would do it. And then the book I would recommend, actually, you don't have to read the book. Our friend Lewis made a documentary called Old Testament Worship in Orthodox Worship in the Old Testament, Orthodox Shahada channel. It's a 2-hour, hour and a half documentary. That documentary is a summation of the Williams and Anstall book, Hugh Wybrew's book on the Byzantine liturgy, and basically I'm going to pull it up, man.
Okay.
It's just demonstrating that that liturgical worship in the Orthodox Church is literally derived from the temple and synagogue service. And because it's derived from that, it is a natural outflowing of having images, a natural outflow of that.
And that includes kissing and prostrating before.
Absolutely, yeah. The Israelites prostrate before the temple and before the ark.
Yeah. I'm definitely aware of that.
Well, what I'm saying is that it's a holistic thing. So the idolatry is something that's primarily and first and foremost internal. It can manifest externally, but what constitutes idolatry is not literally just the bowing. Because we have in Scripture people bowing before Pharaoh, bowing before Joseph bows before Pharaoh. People prostrate bow before Enoch and before Elijah. So it's the interior disposition to believe or think that created things are divine or uncreated. That's what Paul says. Idolatry is to ascribe to created things, the divine nature in Acts 17.
Right. I visited an Antiochian Orthodox church with a friend recently, and I enjoyed all of it, but there was the part where we got in line to kiss the icons, and I got in line and I was ready to do it, but then there was like this one tiny part of me that said, I need to be 100% certain before I participate in this, just in case I'm in the wrong, because I'm not opposed to other people doing it. My question is the binding of the conscience.
Well, I mean, Luther didn't have any problem with this stuff, so...
I'm aware, and I'm not like a Luther fanatic either. I joined the Lutheran Church in lieu of my Baptist background because I said, okay, well, I've been wrong.
Well, I have 2 talks on iconography and the principles behind it. I have Lewis's documentary here pulled up. You can watch that, and that would be what I recommend. But those are great questions, and I understand you're not in a position that any of us haven't already also been in. I was Calvinist for many years, so I totally understand. I had the same sort of hesitancies when I was going from Calvinism to Catholicism. I remember the first time I saw a relic, I was creeped out. But, after a while, it's not going to be a big deal to you at all. But, yeah, those are the books I would check out. I got a few more minutes here. Inspire, what's up?
Hello, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
All right, hey, Jay, big fan. I just wanted to ask for some clarification. I got in kind of a little fight in your YouTube comments section earlier, and I was accused of strawmanning your position, and I really didn't mean to. I'm just ignorant, I guess. Could you go
on what?
Could you explain to me the concept of logic in God, like logic or God being above logic? Could you re-explain that?
Right. So if you read Maximus, for example, he'll talk about the principles of the created order, like mathematics, geometry, logic. These are features and principles that are created. Now, they reflect the divine mind, and they reflect the divine mind in terms of the uncreated logi for those things. But we do not equate the laws of logic with God or with the divine mind. That's a Platonic position. So, for example, Plato taught that universals are essentially identical to the ideal realm. We don't do that. Maximus says universals are created and they can perish. This is a specific distinction to Platonism from our position. So when we say that God is supra-logical, it means that the triad, the Trinity, and the mode of existence that God has is beyond anything in the created order. There are things that God can do and show us in the created order that are analogous or that reflect Him, but they're always pale and limited, and that's part of our apophatic theology. It's part of the notion of divine transcendence, that there's nothing in the created order that perfectly matches up to the unique mode of being of the Trinity. And that's why a lot of times you can see this very clearly when you enter into debates with, say, Muslims who will utilize the logical problem of the Trinity. They utilize the LPT to try to say that, well, logic and analytical philosophy dictates that you can only count in one way or name in one way. And we don't say that about the Trinity. We say that in terms of the Trinity, we're counting both by division and by identity. You see? So you cannot subject God to being defined by the categories of the created order, because then what ends up happening is you get people who say stuff like Muslims do, or like a Roman Catholic, or a Neoplatonist, that if God is absolutely simple outside of time and space, etc., he can't be in time and space. It's a contradiction. It's a logical contradiction. Or by the notion of Aristotelian identity or whatever. Oh, God can't be a triad. It's a logical contradiction.
Okay, thank you. That cleared it up for me.
Right. So what we're arguing is that no, God is above logic, and only in God could you ground the principles of logic. That's a different position than a rationalist position, which says something like God must submit to logic.
Okay, I think that's where I was getting confused.
I like your analogy that you used, Jay. Like if you were to write an autobiography, or if you wrote created a piece of art, it comes from you, and it reflects who you are. But certainly, you wouldn't say it exhausts you.
Yes.
That there's a one-to-one correspondence that's identical. What you create and what reflects you is identical to everything that you are. I always appreciate that you do that analogy.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That's a helpful thing, right? Like if I write an autobiography, it expresses things about me, but it does not exhaust me. I am more than the autobiography about me. And you can say the same thing about anything in the created order that reflects God or reflects the divine mind. It's always going to be limited in its scope. And even logic itself will note that there are certain things that are paradoxes in logic that can't necessarily be solved, that don't necessarily contradict, right? So like the tortoise, what's the thing from Lewis Carroll, the tortoise and Achilles, is an example of a logical paradox that shows that sets are limited, logic is limited, propositions are limited, but even if they're limited and ultimately end up being self-referential, they don't become contradictory.
Gödel's theorem as
Yeah,
well.
they don't become a contradiction just because they have these limitations or become self-referencing. And this plays into the Gödel point. But if you go back to just look up the tortoise and Achilles and the logic paradox that Lewis Carroll sets up, you can see that it is a paradox, but it's not a contradiction. And I'm just using that as an example from even within the created realm, even within the domain of logic, there are paradoxes that occur that are not contradictions. Is that correct? I mean, you know logic better than me, Father Deacon. Is that correct, what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. There's if you just break down the etymology of paradox, there's like a tension, but it's not a contradictions are defined very specifically.
Right. Yeah, a contradiction would be like denying a fundamental thing, like the dog is not a dog, right? So I'm denying the law of identity, right? That would be a contradiction. And to say that God, by his which is what we're told, transcends logical categories, does not mean that he is a contradiction or that he's irrational. He is supra-rational. Thomas. So again, I mean, for the people who are fussing about iconography, like, are you ignorant of how the Jews worship? Do you not know they had images? Do you not know they had images all over the place? They had an altar. They had an ark with angels. They had imagery all in the temple. And do you know they prostrated before the ark and the temple? You didn't know this? I mean, you would call this idolatry because of your Protestant presuppositions. So your Gnostic is your position. You think that idolatry is characterized by merely bowing and prostrating, when multiple people in the Bible prostrate before other human beings. Saints, patriarchs. You don't know this? Jay Carino, if you're not going to come debate, then you can leave. Like, this is not the place for, what did the ark represent? Yeah, Christ. So, I mean, it defeats your purpose if they're reverencing things that image Christ. Just like an icon images Christ. So,
and shouldn't you stop kissing your family members if you're going to be consistent?
Because that's got to be idolatrous, right?
Yeah, well, when they dedicate the temple, go read it. I think it's Chronicles 1, 1 Chronicles 28. I think when they dedicate the temple, all of Israel prostrates. Read both accounts because there are two accounts of it in the books of Kings. All of Israel prostrates before Solomon and before the ark and before the temple. So I guess they're all idolaters. Even though the glory cloud of the Holy Spirit comes down, they're all prostrated. I guess they're all idolaters. But you guys are just ignorant, man. Look, go watch the documentary that we have here, Christian Worship and the Old Testament. Everything that the Orthodox Church does literally comes out of the apostolic tradition from the Jewish temple and synagogue service, except it's a Christianized version. Otherwise, again, guys, mods, if these people don't come to debate, if they're just here to spam, just boot these people. It's not a vehicle for you to spam your Protestant stuff for 3 hours. It's an open forum offer to come debate. Let's see. Next. Andrada. This will probably be the last one. I want to remind you guys who we have the show sponsor, who is Chalk.com, the best in supplementation. Head on over to Chalk.com and use the promo code J44Life to get 44% off those great products that will help you to become toxically masculine. We support toxic masculinity, and Chalk helps you to become toxically masculine. The performance stack is great for guys. It's a great pre-workout synergy product that they have. This includes the Tomcat Elite, which boosts testosterone. This includes the Action 2.0, which gives you more energy. And, of course, the pre-workout Chad mode, which is very strong. I recommend taking small doses of Chad mode if you're going to work out, or you will overheat and you'll lose it. So head on over there to Chalk.com. The link is in the chat right there, CHOQ.com. Promo code JAY44LIFE, JAY44LIFE. That is a subscription thing. You don't have to do that. If you want just the discount, do it JAY40, JAY40 to get 40% off that performance stack. I know you're going to like it. I utilize Chalk on a daily basis. Big fan. And they've been the show sponsor now for 2.5, 3 years. So shout out to Chalk.com. We love Chalk.com. Andrada, what's up?
Hey, so I am a Catholic, and I'm calling in to kind of just ask a question about the Orthodox position. So I've heard one of the biggest Orthodox arguments that I've heard for Orthodoxy is that they maintain tradition and they do not change in the midst of societal change. But my question is, I think that some sort of change is necessary to kind of encourage people to worship. Like, for example, the church teach, like, for example, the Catholic Church teaching on the death penalty. Earlier in the church's history, they allowed the death penalty, but now they condemn it because now we have other ways of treating criminals and punishing them.
Well, that just demonstrates the fallacy of Roman Catholicism, because it was previously argued to be a principle of natural justice. If you read the Catechism of Trent, that's how they argue the death penalty. So what this actually shows is that the Pope is above even the natural law, right? So I think that's a preposterous argument. I'm not trying to be mean to you, but if the Pope is above natural law and he can say that the death penalty is, quote, against the gospel, you understand that that's not the argument that Francis makes. Francis doesn't say that it's merely a brutal thing that needs to be replaced with more humane means of imprisonment or whatever. He says it's actually against the gospel. That's Francis's argumentation. That's way out of field from the Council of Trent and the Catechism of Trent, arguing that the death penalty is a principle of natural justice. So I would argue that no, we do not need to change our morals and update our morals. And the Roman Catholic Church just demonstrates its contradictions by the. You notice the double standard here, right? Because you guys will say that the Roman Catholic Church is the guardian of faith and morals of the apostolic deposit, but then it turns out, well, that can change when it needs to. So it's sort of like you guys allow yourselves the arbitrary ability to change whenever you want it, to sell it, But then you'll argue against changing and try to argue that your position is a maintainer of tradition when it suits you.
Well, the thing is that, the Pope, I will kind of see that for the sake of argument that the Pope perhaps made the wrong decision in calling it a violation of the gospel. But the kind of, what I'm trying to get at is not necessarily the changing of the moral law, but for example, the Novus Ordo and the changing of the Latin Mass, and how the church changes, like how it leads the Mass and things like that. I don't necessarily see how that's like a bad thing to kind of change how we conduct the Mass in subtle ways.
I would say, you know what, if you want that, go for it. I mean, if you want clown masses, you want all the things that attend the Novus Ordo, the puppet masses, the guitar masses, hip-hop masses, go for it. My new approach to Roman Catholicism is no longer to try to warn them or talk them out of it. It's just to encourage them. Because I feel like at this point, if you're really dead set on that, I say go for it. You're choosing your own curse. So have fun with that. Lex, last one. If people don't have the discernment at this point, then I'd just say go for it.
Hello?
Yep.
Hey, Jay. So I am a Baptist, but over the last few months, you have basically all my presuppositions are just faded into midair. I followed up on, your books, your suggested books and your reading list, and that helped out a lot. But my question today is about order of theology. It's something that you bring up in your videos, and you talk about how a lot of Protestants have an improper order of theology, saying that they start from their soteriology.
Right. They actually, many of them, if they're Calvinists, will start from the divine decree and then work to soteriology.
Yeah. So I've noticed that's exactly right, and I think that's what I'm trying to get at here. So you mentioned that the Trinity is probably the first place to start, and then Christology, and then everything should come out from the Trinity.
Yeah, well, and it's not accidental that the history of the church providentially did that very thing.
Oh, okay, all right. So
the ecumenical councils begin with Nicaea and Constantinople I being Trinity and Deity of Christ, right? And then all the successive ecumenical councils, even the seventh, are all about Christology.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. Is what principle do we use to properly find the right order of theology? So would you say it's a historical thing?
Well, I think providentially it's that, but I think just even in terms of divine revelation, obviously God and the incarnation are first. I think divine revelation presupposes and reveals that.
Okay, because it makes sense intuitively to me also. Of course.
When Jesus comes, the majority, especially in the Gospel of John, of his discussions are about the relationship of him to the Father and the Spirit. We've already seen that when I lecture through the totality of the Gospel of John, every chapter of the Gospel of John has references to the deity of Christ and or the Trinity in every chapter. So that's the locus of John the theologian's emphasis, and it's the most quote Trinitarian of the books, the Gospels. So if the Scriptures are our guide, that's where we're going to start our theology. Now, how does Thomas Aquinas begin his theology? We've got 5 volumes of Summa Contra Gentiles based around philosophical speculations about simplicity and blah, 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 blah. Where does John of Damascus begin on the Orthodox faith? Trinity. First thing that he talks about on the Orthodox faith, Trinity.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, man. Thank you. I'm going to have to run. Thank you guys. Great discussions today. A lot of fun. We had some feisty Muslim talks at the beginning. Yusuf, $1. You helped me convert from Islam. Muslims pass through hell for certain amounts of time. I've heard this. I've heard some of them say that for Christians and Jews, hell is eternal, but for some people it's temporal. I have heard this. What is a verse in Surah 1971? Let's see. You're asking. I'm not sure off the top of my head. Let's look it up. 1971. So for those that are interested, I think Jamie, my wife, she's going to be doing a live stream on something. I forget what she said. Something conspiratorial. I forget what. Allah, let's see. Allah truly know best. We truly know best who deserves the burning. There is none of you who will not pass it. This is a decree. We will deliver those who were devout, leaving wrongdoers on their knees. Yeah, I was starting the Quran again the other day from the beginning, and it's interesting that it begins with eschatological things. So the Quran kind of begins talking about the end of the world and judgment and destruction. Sam Shamoon has a great video, by the way, pointing out how, which one is it? It's 210 and 89, 21, 23. And then the attending Hadith, 1840 of Sahih Muslim, I think. All of that, when you read those two passages from the Quran and that Hadith, they're literally cribbed, especially the Hadith, word for word, from Matthew 25, 31 to 46. Now, if we follow the logic of the Muslims who called in to begin with, Platonism, all the Neoplatonism they believe is not from Plato and the Neoplatonists. So in the same way, even though Matthew 25, 31 to 46 is centuries before the Quran and the Hadith, no, these are not cribbed. I mean, it's that silly, right? I mean, obviously, if it's word for word cribbed from Matthew 25, 31 to 46, and if this identifies Jesus as God and Jesus as Allah, if Muslims are going to be consistent, then they have to recognize Jesus as God. Let me pull up the... that was just something that popped in my... That's not related to this verse, but to this section. That's a separate argument. Let me find that. Because this is actually a really good argument. Now, not every Muslim would necessarily go down this route, because they might take a different route, because... let's see. How can I find that? Let me find this. This was a really strong argument that Sam Shamoon had. Let me find it. It won't take a second. It's in my history here. Let's see. Got it pulled up on my phone, I think. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. It's
of Allah, because that's what Jesus said he's going to do when he comes to judge everyone, including Muhammad. Matthew 25, 31 to 46.
Matthew 25, 31 to 36.
This is Jesus speaking. If you want to read verses before, so it has no doubt that Matthew is recording what Jesus says.
The Synoptic Gospels, right?
Yep. Now going to John. John would be the cremation. This is now funeral service, janazah. Matthew 25, 31, 46.
All right. Matthew chapter 25, verses 41 to 46.
Let's try this again, brother.
Just one second. I'm trying to...
I don't know what it is about you and Hussein.
I'm trying to get this video. It's a really good argument related to this topic. Here it is.
To 36.
This is Jesus speaking. If you want to read verses before, so it has no doubt that Matthew is recording what Jesus says.
The Synoptic Gospels, right?
Yep.
Okay, there's the video. It's Sam Shamoon with God Logic. Heated Muslim panics after Christian proves Jesus is God, from the ones I listed there. All right, everybody have a good night. Now, you can also come watch Jamie do her live stream on 20th Century 666. Is that it? Awesome. See you guys.